Right. Yeah. Good evening, everyone, here in person and on Zoom. Thank you all for coming. We are restarting the public session of our meeting. For those who don't come to meetings often that have an executive session, it's slightly different. We did open the meeting at 6 o'clock to discuss and get some legal advice. So we already did the flag salute. So that might seem a little odd. I hope people think we're skipping something. But we are starting our meeting up again at item number 5, which is resume public session. Going to item 6, we received the reports of the borough administrator, director of public works, and the director of water sewers. Doug, I want to thank you as always for you and the team getting these with the explanations. If anyone has any questions for Doug, or Doug, is there anything you wanted to point out this month, welcome to do that.
I'm good, thank you.
All right. Next item on our list is a presentation from our planner. And while Joanna Slagle's coming up, I'll just give everyone, a quick maybe run through of what tonight's meeting will be like. It's a busy one. First, our planner is going to be giving us a presentation on redevelopment and rehabilitation tools and some of the economic incentives that the town has and could soon be using. I see that our planning board chairperson is here as well. This is of interest to our planning board, but this is to educate us and the public on some things that we can start using to help our downtown from a planning and economic development perspective. There will be multiple times opportunities for public comment. So immediately following the presentation, we'll open up for our first public comment session. We then have 2 ordinances that are in second reading. So each of those will have a public comment section. After those happen, we're actually going to talk about, I think why most of you are here, our water rates. Even though it's not listed, we will have its own opportunity for public comment as we discuss that resolution. And then finally, at the end of the meeting, after we do our liaison reports, that will be, I'll call it a third time, but we'll have a public opportunity then as well. So with that, Joanna, if you want to introduce yourself. I know we mostly know who you are.
Is there a remote so I can?
There, I will unfortunately be your remote. I'm just let me know when you're ready in advance, and I will also I'm going to share this up for the Zoom crowd. So I believe, and if anyone on Zoom wants to give me a thumbs up or a hand raise, hopefully they're seeing what's on our screen as well, a presentation on redevelopment and information session up. I see some hand raised. Thank you. Those of you on Zoom for confirming they can see that as well. So Joanna, the floor is yours, and just let me know when you're ready to advance some slides.
Absolutely. So thank you for the opportunity to kind of give this presentation tonight. Again, my name is Joanna Slagle. I'm the borough planner. And I'm going to use tonight really as an informational session. And we're going to talk about redevelopment and where we are in that process of the borough. So for those of you who have been part of this process since, we started this in 2015, this may just be sort of a refresher and overview. For those of you who have never heard of redevelopment and don't know what it is, this will give you sort of an idea of the process and our status. I'm going to apologize up front because this is a lot of information, and I'm sorry, I'm just going to throw this out there. But we're going to have an opportunity to ask questions, and this is an ongoing discussion. Obviously, we've been talking about this for a long time, so this is not the end of this discussion. This is really kind of the beginning in some aspects. So you can go ahead, Ryan.
I think I could. There we go.
So in general, what is redevelopment? Just to give you an overview, this is a process that's commonly recognized as going through the local redevelopment and housing law. And that is a law that was actually enacted in 1992. And it was based on a prior law, Blighted Areas Act. You may recall that act. So this is an updated version of that. And really what is its intent is to provide municipalities an opportunity to use additional tools to areas and sites that have seen sort of that consistent sort of lack of investment. The sites have become a problem. We're just having a hard time bringing those up to back into productive use. So it's really a municipal planning tool that's meant to sort of direct and control development on these properties. So when you consider redevelopment, often it comes from that basic, sort of statement is we need to do something. We know that there's a site that's a problem. We know that it hasn't been able to get sort of investment back into that site. And it's been sort of a long time where we just haven't known what to do. And our typical planning and zoning processes have not been enough to really reinvigorate that site and really bring the capital investment needed to get that site back into use. This can happen for a multitude of reasons, not uncommon in the borough, but statewide. Some sites have remediation issues. Some sites are contaminated. That's a huge barrier to redevelopment sometimes. And sometimes that remediation is historic. It's been there for a long, long time. Market conditions sometimes can cause that stagnation. Obviously, we've all been through the recession. We went through the pandemic. We saw the shift in market conditions. Sometimes that starts that sort of disinvolvement and disinvestment in a site. And really, basically, the main point is that the existing zoning, the existing planning processes that are applied to that site really aren't capturing that site. These sites are unique to the area. You can see it when you look at it. They're different from what's going on around them. And so you need to find new tools to take care of those properties. So this is, I'm not going to go through this whole thing, but just visually, so you can see the redevelopment planning process is very clear in the redevelopment law, and you have to follow this process. You can't move on to another step without completing the first step. I'm going to go through these kind of quickly, but just so I can give you an idea of what those steps are and where we are as a borough in that process. So the first step, Ryan, you can go ahead. The first step is a resolution to conduct a preliminary investigation report. This is a very basic step. This is basically the municipality, the borough identifying that there is a need to look at a site that's been a problem. And they have to authorize that investigation through a resolution. And that resolution, really basic, it just basically says, here's the site, whether we're contemplating condemnation or not, the borough does not. And so the Borough Council did that resolution to initiate this process back in 2015 and 16. So that's when we really started this process. You can go ahead to the next slide. So we were looking at 3 areas at that time. You can see up in the north along Railroad in Somerset, that's our area A, that's typically referred to as the service zone. The second area, area B, is what we call Pastoros. We all know it on Broad Street in Maple. And then the Van Doren Lumberyard site that's over on Model Ave. So those are our 3 sites. The next couple slides are just aerials of those sites, just so you can get an idea of the lay of the land and see, kind of compare these areas to the existing land uses and what they are. So obviously, we all know this area, we have 57 Hamilton, you have the Rockwell remediation sites, you have Valley Oil, some of our other commercial uses along there. There's Castoros. Castoros actually has 3 properties associated with that business. And then the last one is the Lumberyard on Model Ave. So those are the 3 sites that we're authorized to look at. And so then once that resolution is passed, we can go ahead and investigate those sites. And that task is usually sent to the planning board. And you'll see me say this a lot. These type of tasks are often sent to the planning board because the planning board, if you don't know, is your municipal body that does land use. They're dealing with master plan, they're dealing with zoning ordinances, they're looking at site plan applications, variance applications. So they're the ones that really understand the ins and outs of land use. And so oftentimes the planning board is tasked with these jobs. So an investigation report is really actually a very simple document, but it's one of the most key documents in this process. And what you're doing in an investigation report is you're identifying those sites and you're evaluating them against the law and the criteria that's outlined in the law. And what you're trying to do is to see if those sites rise to the level of an area in need of redevelopment, if they are available to open those redevelopment tools. There's 8 criteria. And they only have to meet 1 to be eligible, but often, as you can imagine, these sites typically meet more than 1. This report does not have any planning policy, no development regulations are attached to it. It's really an evaluation process. So in 2016, the planning board prepared that preliminary investigation report, and clearly all 3 of those subject areas met at least one of those criteria. You can go to the next slide. So I'm obviously not gonna read this slide. But you can see I'm trying to bold the language. These are the 8 criteria. And you can sort of pick out sort of the key language here. So you're looking at if the sites are obsolete, if they have fallen into a state of disrepair, if the arrangement of the buildings on that site are faulty or problematic. And we see this actually quite commonly because there are a lot of sites that were constructed 50, 100 years ago. They're not up to modern standards. You can't find tenants to fill those sites because they're looking for something else. So that's a common issue. Have these sites gone into such a state that they're causing a negative social and economic concern? Are they a health hazard in some cases? So you're really looking at all of these criteria and you're looking at the site and you're doing that evaluation. And so of course, this is just a summary of the report's findings. I believe this report has been up on the borough website since its adoption date. So if you want to take a deeper dive into redevelopment, there's a lot of information. I believe it's under the planning board's website tab. You can always go on and find these documents. So for service area, the service zone area A, that's some of the criteria, in particular 57 Hamilton. We all know that it has groundwater contamination that's currently being remediated and will be for a while yet, I'm sure. It had soil contamination around the building, which has been remediated, but not underneath the building, so that's yet to be seen. Area B, the Castoro site, of course, met several of the criteria. Some people may know that there's stockpile millings on that site. It's also a known contaminated area from its prior use. And another interesting thing about the Castoro site that people may not know is that there's actually a stream that runs diagonally under that site. It was piped and relocated somewhere in the 40s, making redevelopment really problematic with new DEP regulations. And then of course the Van Doren lumber yard met several of the criteria as well. And so once you do that report and you have that done, you get to hold a public hearing. And that public hearing is one of the most difficult public hearings for this process because it rises to that level of needing enhanced public notice. And what does that mean? It means that you have to print a notice that not only has a description of the area, has a map of the area, you have to print that notice twice. It has to be done in a certain time frame. And so the planning board went through that whole process and we had that hearing in September of 2016. It was actually pretty well attended. And so we went through the results of that report. And then the planning board recommends that report to the governing body. So once we complete that hearing, again, the governing body is your body that's going to adopt all of this information. They're the adopting authority. The planning board is tasked with preparing it. Governing body is tasked with adoption. So they can recommend all, part, or none of that, those subject areas. And the planning board did that recommendation through a resolution in 2016. And then the next step 5, is then the Borough Council receives that report. They hold another meeting. They're going to review the report and they're going to finally figure out, are they going to designate all, part, of, none of that. And this is interesting because the report can identify that these areas meet the area need of redevelopment, but a council doesn't need to adopt a resolution saying that. At any point in this process, there's no obligation on a municipality to move forward. But if you want to unlock those tools of redevelopment, you have to go through the whole process. And so the Borough Council designated all 3 of those areas as areas in need. And that was done in November 2016. And then usually at the same time that resolution designating those areas are done, the approving authority will also say, okay, we've designated these areas, so now we're going to direct the planning board again to prepare what we call a redevelopment plan. And the redevelopment plan has to be authorized before it can be developed. So usually in that same approving resolution, we authorize the redevelopment plan. Doesn't mean the redevelopment plan is being done immediately. It means it's providing that avenue to start that when the time is ready. So that was done for the lumberyard at Hopewell 57 back in 2016, and then for the Castoro property in 2018. And then finally, the big piece of this is the preparation of the redevelopment plan. And a redevelopment plan, for those of you who are unfamiliar with it, is really a mini master plan that's site specific. So it's gonna include a vision for the area, it's gonna include specific development regulations for tailored to whatever development is proposed for that area, it's gonna have goals and objectives. So it's gonna outline everything. So that plan has to be adopted before anybody can take advantage of redevelopment. And so this is what have to be included in that redevelopment plan. I'm not gonna go through all these, but they're specific in the law as well, what you have to include in the plan, but obviously you're gonna look at your land uses, you're gonna look at your building requirements, you're gonna look at how it relates to local, regional, and state planning initiatives. So you're gonna look at all the things that are required in the law to spell out. And then finally, another hearing about that redevelopment plan. So typically the planning board often will hold sort of a meeting to go through it as a draft, but again, it's the borough council that adopts these plans, so they'll pick it up to borough council for their consideration. Borough council will also hold a public hearing. They may amend or revise the plan, comments, or what they determine is appropriate. And then the council ultimately, if they seek favorably on that plan, will adopt that plan. So those are the 8 basic steps. I know that's a lot. And so we can move on to the next slide. So once that redevelopment plan is adopted, then it moves back to a traditional, like you may have seen in a typical planning board. So that has to go back to a site plan application. So potential redeveloper then has to submit an application to the planning board with all the associated fees and materials for review. They have to notice a hearing, conduct a hearing, provide testimony, take public comment. So all the traditional land use requirements are then enacted, and it has to follow that plan that was adopted. If a redeveloper says, oh, wait, I've changed my mind, I want to do a different use on the site, maybe we've approved residential and they want to add a little commercial space, we have to stop and they have to go back to borough council to seek approval, and then planning board does not have authority to change the plan. And so we've actually been through this whole process once. The Van Doren Lumberyard came in and we did their redevelopment plan in 2018. That was a collaborative effort between the property owner and the borough for a townhouse residential development on that site. These were the goals that were included on the plan. I believe this is up on the website as well, if you want to kind of take a look at what these plans look like. That plan included 13 residential units, 11 are townhouses, and 2 are deed restricted units for affordable housing. As part of our mandated affordable housing obligation. And that site went through the traditional site plan application process and was approved by the planning board in 2022. So we've successfully gone through this process. And so why go through all this? What are these benefits? What are these tools that are unlocked for redevelopment? So here's one of the big ones, collaboration. Typical planning and zoning processes are very fixed. They are not flexible. What applies to one site in the zone applies to all sites in the zone. And as we've talked about, these specific sites have issues. They're not reflective of current zoning standards, and zoning and planning processes alone have not been able to trigger that capital reinvestment into that site. So we need some collaboration. Everybody needs to sit at the table together and try to figure out a solution to these sites. And so obviously, as we've been talking about, the governing body and the planning board work in tandem, adopting, tasking, preparing these documents. The redeveloper in a redevelopment scenario is permitted to initiate the process. So if you're a redeveloper of a site, you can come to the borough and say, I have an idea. And that's very different than traditional zoning. And we have a redeveloper that's interested, they're investing all of that capital, they're taking on the site, and they want to make sure that whatever is going to be developed on that site is going to be economically viable, it's going to be feasible, and it makes sense. So all 3 of these players need to be kind of on the same page to really work to get these sites back into production. Other benefits of redevelopment are on the next slide. These are some of the other ones. So of course, we're allowing for reinvestment of sites. I mean, nobody wants to see these sites sit forever in a declining state. The other really big key is, as I've said, we have no contaminated sites. Environmental remediation is extremely expensive. It's very time consuming. There's a lot of DEP permitting. There's a lot of just time that goes into that, and there's a legal responsibility you take on when you take these sites. And this is why this is very attractive for a lot of municipalities. Local governments cannot take on this burden. It would just be a financial nightmare to try to have taxpayers pay for remediation, to deal with DEP permitting, to take on those legal burdens associated with contaminated sites. So doing redevelopment puts all that burden on to the developer to do. For those of you who don't know, the state of New Jersey is the only state that requires mandated construction of affordable housing units. And that's through our Mount Laurel obligations. If you don't know about affordable housing, you can go on Google affordable housing in New Jersey and quickly fall into a rabbit hole. It is lengthy and it is very historic. So every municipality in the state of New Jersey is given a set number by the state, and that's the number of units that they're supposed to construct for affordable housing. It's state mandated through the Fair Housing Act. Redevelopment offers an opportunity to have a developer actually construct some of those units through them. So that's an important key to this. And finally, the last benefit of redevelopment is what we call a tax abatement or payment in lieu of taxes. This is called a pilot. That doesn't mean the property owner isn't paying taxes. What it means is the timing and the structure of those taxes and the way those taxes are collected is different. And this is really sort of a win-win situation often, because the borough receives 95% of those tax payments directly. The county gets 5%. You can identify a percentage for school district if you want to work that out in the agreement. And then what happens when the borough gets those tax payments through the agreement, they can designate that money for whatever municipal needs they need. It can go towards infrastructure repair, it can go towards capital investments, it can go towards, general costs of running a municipality. And so that's really great. So you can find the greatest need and put that money to that. So a pilot is really important. So that's redevelopment in a nutshell. I'm sorry, that was a lot. And I'm trying to be very conscientious. I know you guys have something else you want to talk about tonight. It's not me. But very quickly, there's another component, while I have everybody here, another component of the redevelopment law that the borough has not taken advantage of yet and may want to consider, and that's an area in need of rehabilitation. And an area in need of rehabilitation, again, is a component of that law. And it's what I typically call redevelopment life. And so the intent of a rehabilitation area is when you start to see those areas that are falling into a decline, you want to try to capture that before it gets any worse. And that's what rehabilitation can offer a tool to do. So you're really trying to get that site or that area before it rises to a more significant level. And it promotes reinvestment in existing structures or through vacant lot infilling. And it offers a short-term tax abatement, like we were just talking about, but a 5-year tax abatement, so it's shorter. But that often is enough for a property owner to be able to reinvest that money back into the site. And so sometimes that's something you want to look at. You can go to the next slide. And so an area in need of rehabilitation designation is also much lighter. There's only 2 criteria. You have to meet 1. That is, if you see that pattern of disinvestment, you can identify it. Or if your housing stock is over 50 years old and that infrastructure is that associated 50-year-old infrastructure needs some sort of repair or maintenance. You don't even have to do a formal investigation, although I always, advise that you do one because you want to understand what area you're going to be designating. You want to know, sort of the basic information of how you're going to designate that area. And then finally, the next slide is the process is also much more streamlined. All that has to happen is the governing body designates the area. It submits a resolution to the planning board for review. The planning board can make comments or not make comments. And then you have to prepare a rehabilitation plan, and that is really basically the programming that's going to be associated with that area. Because again, you have to have sort of direction on what you're going to be doing with this program, and that's usually a borough administered program. So you have to have some administrator cost that's going to go along with that, and keep an eye on that. And you don't even need to do special notice outside of what's always required, for public notice, which is 10 days prior to the hearing. And so that area needed rehabilitation. You know, some municipalities are looking at this right now, as we've seen coming out of COVID, the way people work, where they work, how they work is very different. It's becoming extremely difficult to fill commercial space. And when you can't fill commercial space, those property owners don't have money to then reinvest into that space, and it kind of can become a market condition that becomes a little bit cyclical. We saw it during the recession as well. So this may provide an extra tool in the municipal planning toolbox to reinvest into those properties. So that's my presentation. That's everything in a nutshell. I'm sorry, that was really fast. Happy to answer questions. Like I said, this is not the end of this conversation. We've been working on this a long time. We will continue to work on this. And at any point, if anybody has a question, if we can answer it or find ways to get those questions answered.
Joanna, thank you. I'm gonna turn over to council to ask you, if any members have any questions for you, in a second, but, as between the two processes, the rehab versus the redevelopment, I think historically, the redevelopment ones have taken some time and are very site specific. Could maybe talk about how, we haven't asked you to do it yet, but, conceivably, the benefits of rehabilitation generally to some parts of town, is that something that could be done in, is it years, is it months? And what of these steps would we need if our goal was to unlock some of the tax incentives?
So you would have to go through these steps, because they are identified in the redevelopment law, the steps you have to go through. So you need to designate the area, you need to have the planning board comment on it. When you're designating an area, that's why the study is sort of important, because you want to really identify what areas you want to target. Sometimes it's multiple areas, sometimes it's just one long area. But once you start doing that evaluative process, it becomes sort of clear what you want to target and how you want to target. Sometimes it's residential, sometimes it's commercial. It really depends on the need of the community at the time. So because this is sort of redevelopment light, it's definitely not going to take the type of input that the full redevelopment takes. This can usually be done, within, like 6 months, something like that, depending on what you ultimately identify. Sometimes it takes a little bit longer to do that rehabilitation plan, the programming, because that plan can also include not only the tax abatement, but it can also include other items of incentive for property owners that the borough might want to look at. So it can be sort of a more encompassing document. But the similarity between these two things is it's again, that collaboration. So you need everybody sort of to participate in that program. So not only we know that Borough Council wants to participate in this program through all of the work that we've done, but you also need to pull in landowners and property owners to want to participate too. Because you can't force anybody to do anything with their property, but you want to incentivize that.
Thank you. Open up the floor. The goal of this is, some of us are new, some of us have to be land use attorneys, and will not ask all the questions I'd like to ask, just because I don't want to waste everybody's time. But these are things that are coming up. These are tools we want to unlock to be able to help incentivize investment, or to perhaps unlock tax incentives for things that are happening downtown. So I'm going to suggest that they're coming soon, and I would love to, if anyone here has questions about how they might work. Obviously, Joanna is available to us other times as well, but now's the time. If anyone has any questions about how these things might work.
This was helpful, thank you.
Yeah, I have a quick question. I'm sure I'll have more questions later, but in the area, for the areas in need of redevelopment, and you talked about the few properties, and I think we're all aware that several of those properties have had their proposal and they're just sitting. Is there any statute of limitations, like, is there anything? Because people often come to me like, well, what are we gonna do about that? I was like, well, it's owned by a private property owner, so can you just speak to that a little
Right,
bit?
so that's not uncommon.
Right.
You know, redevelopment, is sort of a process of timing. And so on the municipal end, our sort of obligation is if we've identified that we want to use this tool, we've promoted it, we've gone through all of the tasks. And we've signaled to property owners, we're interested in looking at your site in a different way. Sometimes that's incentive enough for property owners that are paying attention. But other times, property owners are just not ready. And so why you do that approving resolution for the redevelopment plan sort of right away is because when a property owner comes in, you want to have that opportunity to be like, please do something with your site.
Yes.
Come talk to us. But no, the only time that a municipality can force that type of action is if they do something through condemnation. Most municipalities do not want to take that path unless it's really a dire situation.
But they could, in theory, sell their property to somebody else, and
Yeah.
they could start that whole process and have all the redevelopment tools available.
Exactly. Which is not, and also not an uncommon thing.
Right.
Because oftentimes the property owners are sitting there stuck with a property that they can't sell because it has specific issues, we know it's a problem. And they're not in the position to redevelop it, so they'll market it at that.
There's no other questions. Joanna, thank you for all the help that you give us and our planning board. Thank you for your time here tonight. I suspect that, we'll have some consensus and it'll probably be coming, and we'll be asking you to help with some of these things. I personally think a rehabilitation area may not be a heavy lift from an investigation standpoint, but would unlock things like a 5-year tax abatement program, the potential under the new Murphy liquor license legislation as one of the requirements for citing an out-of-town liquor license. If one were to be somehow magically available, they can only be cited in an area of needed rehabilitation or redevelopment. So having that in place would be helpful. And maybe just one, I guess, last question. I know as we look to our affordable housing going forward, and there's a lot of change there, and I'm not asking for an update on that necessarily, but as between the two, there have in the past been bonuses or reasons to be in a redevelopment area when you're, as far as counting your credits for affordable housing. Is that still the case? And does that also apply to rehabilitation, or is it really just for the redevelopment?
Typically that applies to areas in need of redevelopment. I don't think that's changed with the new legislation, but it's being fairly dry on that, and we're still all wrapping our head around that law.
Thank you. Last chance. All right. Thank you so much.
All right, thank you. Have a good night, everyone.
But
Public, right?
we don't, let's do it this way. On the next thing on our agenda is to open the meeting to the public. I think, Joanna, if you're willing to stick around, some people may have questions for you.
And answer any questions.
Will, my one request for this first public session is that there will be, the next item essentially we have after we talk about a tree ordinance is going to be talking about our water rates. So if we use this portion to either ask our planner questions or really any other topic, frankly, for public comment, and then we'll go to our water rates essentially next. So with that, we'll open the floor to the public for those who are here in person. I'm saying this out loud so I do not forget, but I will make the same request we've got some Zoom attendees to try with those as well. So come up front in an orderly way and all right. We've changed our procedures slightly, so if you want to just say your name and generally where you're from, that's enough for us.
Well, my name is Chris Provenzano, and I'm the president of the Hopewell School Baptist Meeting House, and these are some of our trustees. And I would like to read a letter from the trustees to the council, and that's okay. Okay, as I'm sure you're well aware, we're deep in the preservation process and starting to form tangible plans, renovation, restoration. Last year, the board received conditional state historic status and expects full approval in the coming months, which will be forwarded on to the National Historic Status approval later this year, making this one of 2 national historic buildings located in the borough. In addition, the board has engaged Mills and Schnoring Architects LLC to prepare a preservation plan, which is expected to be completed in the next 3 months at an approximate cost of over $100,000. The preservation plan will contain ADA recommendations, including access to the building for those with mobility issues, and may include a request for handicap parking in front of our building. We expect to return to the Borough Council in the near future with ADA access plans and requests to make modifications to the curbing and sidewalk areas. Further, the descendants of the signers of the Declaration of Independence, the John Hart Committee, are currently in the process of updating the John Hart gravesite at an expected cost of $5,000. We may be requesting coned off areas near the meeting house entrance to provide contractor access. All these efforts are being made to ensure that this historic building and grounds are preserved and restored for generations to come. Our goal is to open the meeting house to the public for self-guided tours of the John Hart Memorial and grounds, weddings, social gatherings, and events similar to the Hopewell train station. Recently, the board reviewed and found concern with the Economic Development Council memo dated 2/23/24, specifically the paragraph labeled West Broad Street North, 200 feet east from Mercer Street, which seeks to remove the 200-foot no parking ordinance. The board asks that the ordinance remain along with the signage to allow for access to retain general aesthetics and historical significance, and allow for accessibility to the building for those with mobility issues. The Hopewell Old School Baptist Meeting House Board understands the need for retail parking for the shops on West Broad Street. However, we cannot move our historic building, which should be celebrated and accessible. In conclusion, we request that the 200-foot ordinance and signage remain.
Well, thank you, guys. Let me just first say, thank you for all you guys do on stewarding this important building of our community and the steps you're taking to make it more accessible and usable by the public. I think I speak for everyone in Hopewell Borough to say that we are, in your debt for what you're doing, and keeping this as an asset that our community can have and that everyone can use and enjoy and understand. So thank you for that. I'll say maybe we've heard you on the parking thing. Well, my thought is that that's a detail that will get discussed with EDC, and I certainly, I've heard you, I think council has, and I think EDC has as well, and we'll take those all into account as we figure out. There's currently no, while there's a proposal, there's no ordinance yet drafted, and it'll be a long process of collecting comments for which we
Yeah, and I mean, EDC would be also happy to meet with you directly and have a direct conversation.
Excellent.
Because I think our goal was to draft an ordinance for next month's meeting, but I'd be more than happy to sit down with you before then.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Yeah.
Just, Mayor Kennedy, we are all borough residents too. If you want us to name our street addresses, we can. I don't know what the format is.
I appreciate it. I think I'll defer to our attorney. The rules in that regard are changing, and we're changing with the time, so I'll say that. So I think we have enough information for the record, so thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. We know who you are.
I didn't expect to have so many people at once. I thought it was a line. So I will, if anyone else from in person would like to speak, if not, I'm gonna ask if anyone on Zoom likes to raise their hand for public comment at this point, knowing that we will quickly get to the water discussion. I will represent that I see none. on, I'll put it up here too, no, there's no hands up, on Zoom, so I'll take a motion to close this one of many public comment sections. Deb, wait a second.
Second.
All right, David, thank you so much. Next, administratively, we've got 2 sets of minutes. If anyone's reviewed them, take a motion to approve the March 7th regular and executive session minutes.
I'll second.
Deb, second. Heidi first. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Next, we have second reading and a quick public hearing on our stormwater control tree ordinance that we talked about last month. Reggie, if you could read it by title.
An ordinance of the Borough of Hopewell, County of Mercer, New Jersey, regarding the tree removal and replacement and amending the revised general ordinances of the Borough of Hopewell, 1975.
I believe this is our liaison to the Shade Tree Committee was instrumental on this and did an explanation last time. Doug, if there's anything else you want to add to this, this is essentially our tree removal ordinance and a set of fees and requirements for what we would need to do now to get a permit to take a tree down, whether it's replacement or paying into a fund. And I'll just say I'm thankful for the work they did to have the fees and size of trees and caliper sizings kind of match what we were looking for in Hopewell. They put a lot of work into that.
Yeah, the main thing is that we're also protecting the trees owned by the borough. We have it now codified, right, that there's a process to have a tree taken down, that borough residents can't do anything to a borough-owned tree without communicating with us. So that's an important step we've been trying to get done for years.
And also, may I just, this ordinance is also required by the New Jersey Department of Environmental Protection.
Yeah.
And I believe the deadline for adoption is May 1st, so you're well within
Well within in that we're
the deadline, but.
just on the wire.
basically,
Just over the wire.
it's for purposes of ensuring stormwater compliance by municipalities. This type of an ordinance, very similar to what is being, what is on for a public hearing, is essentially required by the New Jersey Department of Environmental Protection.
Yeah, but also wanted.
It probably is worth adding this, I mean, so the DEP had a sort of a template we followed to some degree, but essentially we had some discretion in terms of how prescriptive some of these requirements were, particularly on private property, because there are elements in the public property, but in terms of diameters of trees that can be removed and so on and so forth. Is that correct?
I've seen other towns with slight distinctions and they've been approved by the DEP, but the provisions governing the trees on private property are actually very similar to the New Jersey Department of Environmental.
All right, what I'm saying, in other words, ours are more prescriptive or more stringent than theirs. They're within the range of what they require.
They are, I don't know if the requirements for the removal on private property are more stringent.
We're pretty close.
I think they're
I think
pretty
they're pretty close. What I'm trying to get at, it's not explaining it well, is we were required to have those
Yes.
elements
Yes.
pertaining to private
Absolutely.
property. It's not
Absolutely.
something that we
Yes.
I'm
simply
sorry.
did.
Absolutely.
No, I just wasn't articulating it.
Sorry.
And because it is kind of unprecedented in the sense of the DEP reaching into people's backyards. I mean, I'm just, whether you
It
agree
is.
with it or not, it's a fairly unusual thing. There's another element of it having to do with water service.
But it all has
But
to do with, trying to prevent stormwater.
I understood, but
Yeah,
it
we're talking about
is
that. I know you understand.
fairly unusual for the DEP
Yes.
to,
Absolutely. Tell people what they can do with their own trees.
exactly.
I agree.
And there are other, and I'm not saying it's good or bad, but I just think people should understand this isn't something that we initiated, that element of it, that we
Right.
were required to
That is
actually
correct,
have
yeah.
this in some form.
But it is a type of ordinance that has gained popularity in many municipalities in recent years, and now all municipalities that are.
I mean, a lot of municipalities have had ordinances like this, mostly aimed at developers, right? With the notion that somebody comes in, they clear cut a site,
I would say almost all,
and yeah, they've been out there for a
for
long
purposes of
time.
development applications, but not on.
What to me makes this a little bit different, and I guess other municipalities have it, is you're looking at individual previously developed yards, like an individual tree, as
Right.
opposed to saying, you, John B. developer, can't come in and just clear cut the whole forest. So it's It's just worth pointing out.
Right, and this isn't a land use,
It's new.
this isn't a land use ordinance, it is a general police ordinance, so it is very distinct. You may still have the planning board require certain items that have to be completed as part of a development application in reference to trees that would probably go above and beyond this.
Yeah.
This is going to be your minimum.
Yeah.
Applicable across the board, and it would probably impact the, individual property owners more than anything. And like Ms. Steeler indicated, the other element of this that is more stringent than the state is that it requires a permit anytime you touch a street tree that I believe it's 2 inches or larger
Right.
in caliper. So you you
Right.
cannot just unilaterally remove a street tree without getting approval. And the municipality has discretion to decide whether or not it's going to be allowed, because those trees are on municipal property.
Yeah, they're right, so, yeah.
I'd like to motion to.
Well, so,
Sorry.
it's already been introduced. Actually, the next step, that was actually all technically our introduction. So
Right,
we'll
that's
see,
true.
open the meeting to the public for comment on this ordinance, our stormwater tree ordinance, both in person or by show of hands online, we would take as well. Sorry, seeing none, I would accept the motion to end public comment close the public hearing on ordinance 880. Krista, do we have a second? Thank you, Samara. All in favor? Next, I'll take a motion to approve on second reading ordinance 880. Thanks to adopt.
I'll vote that.
Thank you. Do we have a second?
Second.
All right, Samara, roll call.
Mr. Mackey?
Yes.
Ms. McCollum? Yeah. Ms. Steeler?
Yes.
Ms. Weaver?
Yes.
Ms. Williams?
Yeah,
Thank you. All right.
All right.
So, the next couple of items, and some of these will go out of order, but we'll do our best to treat every piece of the discussion about our water rates, the water system, and what we're doing going forward, openly, for comment. So I'll do my best to make sure that if your comment is on one part of it rather than the other, we're not gonna, artificially pigeonhole, into a procedural, abyss here. There are technically 3 things that we're gonna be talking about. Item 11, which is the public hearing technically and second reading of our ordinance that allows us to have a range of rates. We started that last month. Item 12, which is the resolution that will actually set the rates. And then I will ask both, either in my discretion or ask to remove from the consent discussion, or at least we'll discuss it now, resolution 2024-56, which is the acceptance and I guess public introduction of a report that we've received from Phoenix Advisors, the firm that our financial advisors that we've hired to look at our water system and explain to us the options going forward. So perhaps as a way to start before getting into the technicality of ordinance 881, I'm gonna use our screens here, so bear with me. And I'd like to first take you through the information that we have about where we are and why we're here with our water rates. We'll then finish up the technical piece on the ordinance. We'll talk about the resolution that would set the rates. We'll have a public comment period on that before we actually vote on it. And then talk about and do the resolution for this report, which is really a going forward item, an item that we've started many months ago. But to look at what the options are, in terms of whether we keep the system, whether we start a process to explore selling it. So with that, with apologies, let me find the button to start this. And let me also have to share it for our remote Zoom viewers. And here we go. Just as a start, I want to thank our municipals, staff and professionals, particularly Phoenix Advisors, Doug Walker, Administrator, and our CFO, and the members of our water committee who happen to be on either side of me, David and Krista, for working on this over the last couple of weeks quite intensely. None of us are happy about where we are. We're about to go through some numbers that we find shocking, the things that we have to pay ourselves. There's really little way to sugarcoat this. We're gonna go through how we got here, what our options are, which are very few, to pass these costs along amongst the 750 or so users of our water system, and then ultimately, what our options are going forward and what things we're exploring to keep costs down or do fair, or to make sure our rates can be fair to all of our users in the future. David, you want to perhaps start us a little bit off here as we start on the explanation side?
Sure, I mean, maybe that first slide, Ryan, that just has the water system on it, thanks, I don't know if everybody can see it, I mean, everybody knows where we live, but there's just some basic information about the system and a couple of details on the history that I think are relevant to this, so, this is something I actually put together for the DEP last year, so, we have 764 connections in our system, about 2,000 people, give or take, in the borough and a few in the township, as you can see. The source of our water comes from two places currently, which is well number 4, which probably most of you have heard a lot about when you've got all the PFAS notices and so on. And the other is an interconnection with New Jersey American Water, from which we buy water. And an important little bit of history of that is that when I first started doing this 25 years ago, we had 4 operating wells. And we produced all of our water locally. And in 2000, the standards were changed for arsenic in drinking water, lowered by an order of magnitude. And so well number 6, which is the one that we have in the park, we had to take offline. We looked at the economics of treating it, putting in a treatment system. At that point, I think the capital cost ended up being about $1.5 million plus the operating costs. And we could get by with that well. So we took it offline. It's still there. It could be put back into service with a treatment system, but and then we had 3 left. And then around 2006 or 2005, there was another regulatory change that affected our 2 other main producing wells that were up at Burton Avenue, wells 2 and 5. And that was a change in standards for 2 radionuclides for uranium and radium, which also occur naturally in that aquifer, and were just slightly above the standards. So we then went through an exhaustive process of figuring out whether we can afford to treat for those. And unfortunately, had 2 different treatment systems for 2 different compounds that are very different, very expensive. We did pilot studies. We actually, got engineers involved to figure out the cost, reached the same conclusion we did with number 6, which was it was really too expensive to treat the capital and the long-term operating costs. That left us with really one choice, because we had to replace those 2 wells, or at least those sources, with another source. At that time, this is in around 2006, we paid to have an interconnection installed with New Jersey American. At that point, they had run their main from Hopewell Township down to Kings Path because they needed to provide water for households with contaminated water. We forked out $300,000 for the cost of the vault and the meter so that we could buy their water. And since then, we've purchased, depending on conditions, between 30 and 70% of our water from them over time. So that is the single largest source of our water costs. We have been working on a possibility of getting well number 6 back into service. We've applied for a grant with an NJDEP. It's actually a federal grant, but it comes through them for $2.3 million, which, if approved, could potentially put a treatment system into well number 6 to deal with the arsenic and PFAS, and a PFAS treatment system on well number 4. If we were able to accomplish that, we would be able to produce probably almost all of our own supply and have the New Jersey American well as a backup. The problem with buying the water is we are not eligible for a discount in price when we buy the water that, for example, a large city would buy. They have sort of a minimum threshold. So actually, the rate that we pay for supposedly sale for resale is the same rate that you would pay if you were in Princeton Township or Hopewell Township at a residence. That is, and so it's important to understand that's a big part of our water cost. What we try to do is to produce as much water as we can from well number 4, because the main cost at the wellhead is mostly the energy cost, and it's a fraction of what it costs to buy the water from New Jersey American. So to the extent that we can produce as much as possible from well number 4 and buy the balance, or I'm sorry, purchase the balance from well number from the interconnection, that's what we've been doing. But we just can't produce enough water from that one well to meet our demand. So the other problem, and that's, okay, yeah, no, that's good. No, we can go into the rates. I was just to give a little more background, and actually maybe I'm jumping ahead of myself, but I thought, let's just give you some background on the system. So we've been purchasing water from New Jersey American since 2006. We've spent about $3.8 million on water purchases since then. It's a lot of money, but I'm pretty sure that the principal and interest on the capital investments in those treatment systems would have been substantially more. So anyway, that's to give you that background. I'll also mention that the New Jersey American raised their rates in September of 2022 by 13%. There is a proposal to raise their rates again in September of this year by 26%. So that would be an aggregate of 42% increase over 2 years. And we don't have much of a choice in that. They're regulated by the Board of Public Utilities. So part of what's factoring into all this is the cost of purchasing water, the increasing cost of purchasing water. We've also had last year, we had to purchase quite a lot of additional water because there was a water leak that was actually on a residential property. This is actually not part of our water system, but between the street, between our system and a house. That was not apparent at the surface. Most of the time we have a water main break and we fix those kinds of things frequently, and we get right on them, you see water coming out of the ground. This was a little plastic line, 1 inch in diameter under someone's yard. They didn't know about it, we didn't know about it, they were still getting water. But what happened was that it was a very large leak that just couldn't be seen at the surface. And once that leak was fixed, which was in October of 2023, our water consumption dropped by 20,000 gallons a day. And that adds up to 7.3 million gallons a year. Now that's money that we can't recover because the meter on a residential service like that is at the house and the leak is between the meter and the street. So there's no way of recovering that money. The other thing was that we were aware that something was going on in the system because there was a spike in water demand. This was toward the end of 2022 and into the beginning of 2023. But that coincided with a major drought. You may remember between July and October of 2022, there was a protracted drought, which means that people tend to use more water and also reduce the output from our well. So the difference between what we were able to produce and what the demand was went up. And we knew all those things, but we also had a rate increase 2 months before. So all those things happened at the same time. So when we saw this change in the demand and we saw a change in our bills, we didn't recognize then, we couldn't see that it was a leak of this magnitude. Once we did find out, and I found out mostly by doing some calculations on the amount of water we metered during the previous 3 months and the amount of water coming into the system, I realized we had a problem. And then the question was finding it. And the problem is with these kinds of leaks, the ones that you can't see is that the only way to find them is actually using instruments. You have to hire a leak specialist to come in. And we have about 11 miles of piping in our system that we own and about another 7 or 8 miles of piping on private property near people's service lines. So out of all that, it's very challenging to find. But we engaged somebody who was very competent at doing this. By the time we got through contracting and everything else, and then they started their work, they were able to find the leak in October of 2023. But that was after we probably lost about 6 million gallons of water that year that we had to replace. That will get mitigated. our bills have dropped from New Jersey American have dropped substantially. The bill we just got is the lowest that we've had since October of 2020. The system demand has dropped dramatically. We've also fixed other leaks because we now have a permanent leak detection system-wide, which came at some cost, where now, once a month, our leak detection contractor drives through town, downloads data from 65 permanent sensors in the system that actually listen to flow in the pipes. And in the middle of the night, the program, and they basically are able to hear the sound of water running in the middle of the night when most people aren't using it and when there's not much traffic. And then they do a lot of signal processing and fancy stuff, and then they go out and they actually, if they have evidence of a leak, they pinpoint it. They can actually pinpoint it right up to somebody's front yard and onto it. And so that becomes an insurance policy now, that you can do this once a month. You don't actually have a leak that you won't know about for more than a month. And you can detect these leaks that you could not otherwise see at the surface. And since then, we've mitigated the two others that we know about that were able to be fixed, smaller ones, much smaller, by the water department. There are two more that are under Broad Street that we have to pay for this year to hire a contractor to do. I know this is a long-winded thing, but I want you to understand where this comes from. So this year, we have to raise an additional $220,000 for our water department. And we have to do that before the end of 2024. It has to be in the next 3 quarters. And so the rate increases that we're proposing are designed to be, and they are accounting for two things. One, the cost that we had from last year, which was about $108,000 over budget between water and other unanticipated expenses that we have to make up this year because we're a regulated utility. And anticipated costs for this year, the things we know we have to do, they're absolutely critical. And we put all that stuff together and we've cut it to the bone, I can tell you. It's about $220,000. So long-winded intro. But where that leaves us is we're using a two-step process for this. One is first the ordinance, which is the first thing that we're going to talk about. And that establishes a set of ranges, and they're very broad ranges, that if you pass that ordinance, you would then have a separate discussion and a separate resolution to decide what the specific rates are going to be. So as long as those rates are within the ranges that are on this table, then they comply with the ordinance. And we did that because, for one thing, it gives us some flexibility. So if rates have to go up or it could go down, we can do it much more quickly without having to introduce an ordinance, wait 30 days, read the ordinance, all that. We can simply do it by resolution. It also gives us the ability to have a discussion, a public discussion on the specifics of those rates, because, sorry about all the technical detail, but when you introduce an ordinance and then you have the public hearing on the ordinance a month later, if you make a substantive change to that ordinance, then you have to renotice the whole thing and start the process. But if you're passing a resolution, which is what we would do ultimately to adopt these rates, we can have a discussion in public tonight and have some flexibility to decide what those final numbers are going to be. I know this is a lot, it's like drinking from a fire hose, but.
Unfortunately, one place where there is not flexibility though, is filling the gap from last year and coming up with a budget that gets us to an even ledger for this year. We, unfortunately, as a regulated municipal utility, don't have any choice but to have a budget that equals our expenses. So we have gone in creating that $220,000 number, which compares to $625,000 from last year. So we are, it is a sizable, many people use different words for it. I'll use sizable, use whatever word you like. It is a giant increase. But our hands as a town, our obligation, and the only thing we can do is to figure out how to divide up this increase amongst us. If we were to not do that, our utility would no longer be what's called self-liquidating. We would not be able to borrow money. It would be unfortunately, I'll use the word fiscal disaster for the town. But it would, Lisa, Doug, give me some better words here, but it would tie our hands and we would not be able to keep the lights on, if we chose not to, take this step. So the two parts of this are, one, identifying where these extra costs came from, coming to the number of what we need to raise that we can, and our professionals can in good faith say that, yeah, it'll be enough money to get through this year for the system. We're hopeful that we'll do better than that. We're hopeful that we'll find more leaks perhaps, again, this is a rate that allows us to cover 2 years worth of problems in 3 quarters, because that's what we're required to do. But come next year, I'll say the hope at this point, but we don't yet know, but our intention would be, I think I speak for all of us, is that since we would not be recouping $110,000 from a prior year's gap, that we would be able to adjust the rates again, and these ordinance would allow us that flexibility almost as soon as that became a possibility. But what's before us tonight, and it's 3 different technical things, but it's this, as Dave was saying, this ordinance that gives us the range. It is the resolution that is a little bit more flexible, as it allows us to have the discussion tonight about how we, I'll say, whack up that increase amongst us. And then, moving forward, the budget for 2023, which is I think the water committee and our professionals is essentially saying it's the minimum amount of money to spend, and the least pain for us to allocate, frankly, amongst us, and keep the system running for this year.
And just to add, so in trying to figure out how much money we needed to raise, one of the things that's really difficult, it's a little bit, I was talking to a friend of mine who's a farmer, has the same problem, everything's weather dependent, there are a number of factors you can't predict, and you try to account for. And so I spent probably 10 days doing data analysis, looking at scenarios, trying to predict as best I can with my crystal ball how much water I think we're gonna have to buy this year, because that's a big issue. And that's taking into account a couple of things. Yes, our demand is going down because we fixed these leaks and we're tracking those, and I've actually done analysis of our demand and system parameters going back to 2006, so I can understand these patterns. I've looked at what happens when we have a drought, because a drought, again, increases people's usage. It also reduces output from our well because we start drawing on it and you don't get the same kind of recharge. So that's a double whammy. It cuts down our internal production, increases our demand overall. Trying to look at those things historically, like what are the responses of the whole system as people to those circumstances. So I actually did that. And again, I mean, you don't need to necessarily know how the sausage was made, but what I want you to know is that we've really done an exhaustive analysis on that aspect of it, and then coordinating with our CFO, with our administrator, and with the others on the team to say, you know, what realistically do we absolutely have to do this year, and what are the things that we don't. So one of the things we absolutely have to do this year is replace the pump in well number 4, which is 25 years old, and which has been putting out less water. And of course, the less yield we get from the well, the more we have to buy. That's a fairly modest investment. It's $25,000 or $30,000. It can be done relatively quickly. I anticipate that our yield, all fingers and toes crossed, may go up by 25% on that well once we replace the pump. So that's a critical thing. We have a couple of leaks underneath Broad Street that we have to hire a contractor to do because they have to saw through 8 inches of reinforced concrete that's underneath that road. It makes it much very expensive, and that's probably another $25,000 at least. We're working on the bids right now. And those 2 leaks are not as big as the one I described before, but together they could easily add up to $10,000, $20,000, $30,000 a year in terms of water purchases. So these are things that actually over a period of 6 months or so will probably pay for themselves to some degree in terms of offsetting water costs, but we won't see those benefits before the end of the year. And the other thing is, with a leak is you fix it and then you wait to see actually how much the system changed. You don't know exactly how much is coming out until it's done. So all those uncertainties, again, a long-winded explanation, but I just want you to understand that we put enormous amount of effort into trying to, you know, bring this down to the penny to what we absolutely need, recognizing that we may be wrong, but we'll find a way to get through it. You know, we just looked at all the possibilities because we literally looked at every penny carefully. We understand that this is painful for a lot of people, for virtually everybody in our community. And,
One last place of stones being turned over exhaustively in the last few months and prior as well. But it's David and other folks and our consultants and Doug going and meeting with every possible source in the state of New Jersey and beyond for grants and funding. This includes meeting with the I-Bank that used to be called the Environmental Infrastructure Trust. Their response to us was, you know, gosh, we recognize your need, but you're not in a category that we can do something for. Maybe next year, we'll talk to the legislature about someone in your position. Similarly with DEP, there are grants we're eligible for and are pursuing for capital projects, but none of those things actually address this short-term shortfall. And they have no products or grants available for us. And we have been exhaustively pounding the pavement, looking for those as well as a possible alternative to, I'll say again, hope a short rate increase. So I just wanted to put that up there as well. As we get into the numbers, it's a function of what has happened, what we need to raise and the evidence that we've tried as well to find other alternatives to changing our rates. Sorry, that detour.
no, I think.
We move forward, and there's a lot of people here.
I understand. So what I'd like to suggest is, I mean, we can have a discussion about the rate ordinance. But again, we're gonna have another discussion about the actual rates themselves. So what I was gonna do is postpone till we talk about the rates themselves, the process of how we arrived at that.
Yeah, I think that makes sense.
Through this mechanical.
That makes sense.
Yeah, this is just a summary of pretty much what I've told everybody, but, so do we want to open up the floor for discussion on the rate ordinance? Or do we want to discuss the whole process first before we do that in terms of what we're proposing in terms of rates? How do you want to do it?
I think it makes sense to go through the whole process. I mean, I think it's a little nuanced to ask for people's opinion about a range of rates.
But they can't see the rates. Right, okay. So let's do that. So those of you, hopefully, all of you, had an opportunity to see the fact sheet that we put together. The purpose of that obviously was to let you know that also, I mean, I know it's a little bit hard to follow, but to give you concrete information about what the actual cost implications would be based on how much water you typically would use. Whether you're using 2,000 gallons or less in a quarter, or whether you're operating a business and using 150,000. We want to kind of cover all those bases. So what we did, we looked at our existing rate structure, and I set up a model so that you could kind of vary the parameters and decide, you know, how much of a raise you would apply across these different areas. And it's actually, it might be, Ryan, if you would mind, with that graph there, would you just put up that? Yeah, thank you. So this is a graph that I put together that kind of shows you how many users we have in each of our sort of usage categories. So our lower rate category is 0 to 2,000 gallons, and 2,000 to 5,000 gallons, 5 to 10,000, so on. The rates change with each thing. And what you can see, there are about 50 households that actually, households or businesses, customers that use less than 2,000 gallons a quarter. And then the median usage is about 10,000 gallons a quarter. And then you see there are about over 300 customers that use between 10 and 20,000, and then it kind of falls off, and you have restaurants and other businesses that are relatively high users that are in that over 40,000 category. So it was important to point this out because it also tells you where a lot of the revenue comes from. A lot of it is from the sort of lower category users. So if you wouldn't mind, just put us back on that. Yeah. So one of the things we've done over the year with previous rate structures is we've to some degree subsidized the lowermost rate, the flat rate that's at that 0 to 2,000 gallon rate. Based on the notion that there's a certain amount of water that everybody has to have. It's just essential water to live. And that if you're a person of limited means, you want to keep that affordable. And so what we've essentially done is created an escalating rate structure where as you go into higher and higher use categories above that, the rate per 1,000 gallons goes up. So it's like a graduated structure that the IRS would use. And the difference between those different levels as you go up is about 4%. So the first thing we did was say, well, if we put an across the board increase just on all the rates as they are, what would have to be to generate $220,000? And then we adjusted that lowermost rate, that 0 to 2,000, by discounting it by $5. It's a fixed fee. So the result of that is that a person who's using only 2,000 gallons or less per quarter is going to be looking at a 22% increase, but it adds up to about $11 a quarter. So $44 a year increase for that person. But what that does is it's pushing more of the cost incidence on the higher users, and it becomes progressively higher as you get into the very high users that are commercial users. So they're looking at about a 54% increase. A lot of money. And now that's not the only way to do this. And one of the things I wanted people to understand, the last time we had a discussion about rates a couple of years ago, there are people that said, you're being lazy, you haven't looked at all the options and so on, and should be more progressive. So believe me, we did that. We went through a lot of iterations. So we learned a couple of things. There are ways that you could, for example, moderate the impact on the high end. You could look at the people who are above 40,000 gallons and you could say, well, instead of having this graduated structure that we have, you could discount that too and reduce their increase. What that does then is push more of the cost onto the higher residential users, the people that are in the 15 to 20,000 gallon range. There is no good answer to this. You can do all sorts of sleight of hand and you can push things around, but you're gonna be hurting somebody. And so at the end of this, as a water supply committee, we discussed these and came up with what we thought was the best of many bad iterations. And this is what we proposed. But it is a proposal. And the way that our rate structure, the ordinance is structured, as we had on the other slide, is it was a series of ranges. So as long as we are within those ranges in the resolution that we pass, we can meet the terms of that ordinance. Anything I've left out on that, Ryan?
I'm afraid not. The amount that we had to raise this year was fixed. What we heard last year as a council was that the flat incremental increases, the same percentage up and down, and I voted this way myself, was regressive. And effort was taken with that information to have some small amount of protection for the most needy. This is the small apartments. Maybe it's a business that just has a toilet and a sink. And the financial impact to the rest of the users by subsidizing them a bit or having their impact be smaller is not significant. The $5 times 50, it's not for that number of users on the histogram. We're talking about these first kind of 2 or 3 categories here predominantly that get that, I'll say subsidy, but won't get hit as hard. But what that means though is there's fewer of them and they're using less water. We're not actually changing much of an impact on the higher end. From the other way, it goes quite, unfortunately, substantially different and becomes more progressive. However, hearing that from our discussion last year with how to address rates, we attempted to be, I'm not going to use the word fair because none of this is fair, to be honest with you. But to treat the neediest, smallest apartment users with the smallest increase, because that would impact them potentially financially in a different way than a larger user. Beyond that, again, the amount that we are forced to raise this year is fixed. And our question was how best to allocate that across the 750 to 800 users of water here. We felt that this creates an incentive to use less water, that the bottom end where you would get essentially pay the same, no matter if you use no water or just a little bit. Saving water isn't going to change your rate or what you pay much at all. But beyond that, we explored, and I'll say, well, none of this makes me happy in any way. I do want to thank our administrator and water supply committee for, we sat down with every member of council to go through this, to try to understand if there were different ideas, to try to educate us all on how, I want to say this works because it doesn't work, but how this process is imposed upon us by having to be self-liquidating and raise these funds. So from a procedural perspective, and maybe before we get into the public, if anyone from council as part of the discussion presentation has something they'd like to say or ask, I think the next thing I would do is open the floor to the public generally. That doesn't mean there will be a second time to when we actually get to the ordinance. But I think I'd like to hear from the public now about what everyone thinks and get as much input as possible.
Yes, let's do that now.
Yeah.
It's nearly 8:30.
So with that, the floor is open now to the public, essentially for anything involving water at this point. You don't be specific to the ordinance or the rates. Mark, come on up.
A quick question. I was told I didn't hear anything about the reservoir. I was told there was a hole in the reservoir and was that fixed? Separate from whom?
No, I mean, I'll talk about the
A
reservoir.
good looking guy on First Avenue? Just like this tall?
No, I'm sorry, no, so there's a reservoir, it's a 230,000 gallon reservoir, it's an underground, basically like a cistern. It's on, North Star Avenue. That's what actually provides the water pressure, the elevation difference between there and here is why it's up there. It's 120 years old. Only. It's brick and lined with concrete. We do think that there is some leakage happening from the reservoir. We've been focusing in the last, since we got our leak detection expert on there, on the leaks in the system, which are the easiest things to get out and do. One of the next things we're going to do is try, well, first of all, we're looking at how the system's responding as we're getting rid of these leaks and tracking. What we do is every quarter, you can only do this every 3 months. When you read the meters, you get the meter readings for the whole town, you get the amount of water that's metered, okay? Then you also keep track of how much, what we call the total water entering the system, which is the water we buy plus the water we pump from the well. So there's X amount of water coming in, there's X amount are metered. Then we look at the difference between those things, and that percentage is what we call unaccounted for water. Some of that is water that's actually not billed by the borough. Some of that's water used by the fire department, but not a lot, I think, but we're trying to actually track that down just to account for it. But that's the overall metric that you use to track your system losses in general, okay? So if we fixed all the leaks that we know of in our distribution and piping system townwide, which will probably be the case in a couple of months unless something new springs, what's left is probably related to the reservoir and also to another factor that as our meters get older, they may be under-registered, but at any rate. So the next thing we're gonna do is try to actually gauge the reservoir. I don't know that we have the financial resources certainly in this next year to do repairs on the reservoir, but we're certainly going to explore all the options because I mean, if there is something that could be relatively easily fixed with an inspection and
Is it significant? I mean,
it probably is, but it's hard to know. I mean, and I'll tell you also, so you understand, and this is not to make it better, but all water systems leak because they're just, there's too many. What the DEP considers an acceptable threshold is a 15% unaccounted for water. 10% is a really good modern type system. We could probably be losing 15% out of the reservoir. I mean, or more. it's hard to know until we get all the other leaks under control. And then actually, the way we're gonna look at the reservoir is, it's a two-chamber reservoir, wall in the middle of it and two pipes coming out, and that allows you to shut off one side, then we put a pressure transducer, we'll gauge it in the middle of the night and see if it's actually falling, nobody's using water. And then we'll shut that side off and do it with the other side, and then we can calculate and find out what the loss is
But
actually.
this is a 2025 project.
Yes.
Yeah, I think it really is, because, and at this point, you know, one of the next things we're gonna do with the water committee is just get that process of evaluation looking forward. I wanna talk to people that are tank inspection companies. I have no idea what repairs on a reservoir like that cost, whether it's simple, whether it's complicated, all that stuff. Right now, what we've been doing is focusing on the low hanging fruit, which is the stuff that's in the street and the front yards that we can get at. And that, I mean, that one leak I was talking about was about 7.3 million gallons a year. That was equivalent to 18% unaccounted for water from one residential yard. I'd never even heard of anything like that, from a pipe this big around. But we have 125 pounds per square inch in our system, and that was a plastic pipe, they split open, and that's what it did.
But the
John,
reservoir is
you're done with that.
before, oh, sorry.
Yeah.
The reservoir is before the meters though, so even if there's a leak, the only thing that you're losing, the only thing that you're losing is the electricity to pump it into it.
Well, no, but the thing is, if you're losing water anywhere in the system, you have to buy or pump more water to meet your demand. So the way it works is, so,
Yeah, I understand that part, but the leak is actual water that you paid for that is going out from American Water.
well,
versus-
all of our water gets pumped up to the reservoir to provide pressure and then comes back into the system.
Oh, even the American, so it is.
Yeah, it's because the interconnection operates like a well,
Yeah.
so it's an on-demand thing, you switch it on just the way you'd switch on a well. So we try to produce as much as we can from number 4, and then, you know, we have it on a system where it's like, okay, we have to make up because the reservoir has to be kept at a certain level, right? And so if we're having substantial loss from the reservoir, I mean, that's a problem.
Yeah.
But it's probably a much harder problem to fix than, you know, excavating a main or fixing a main. And so it's absolutely on the list, but we've just been trying, it's a race, John. We've been trying to, once we really understood the magnitude of the issue, and also we're dealing with these water increases, it's like every single leak that we can find and mitigate translates directly into money. So 1 gallon per minute over a year is $5,000 worth of water from New Jersey American. That front yard leak was a 20,000 gallon a minute leak. Or 20,000 gallons a day, I'm sorry, it was, yeah, and that was, it's.
About 6,000 a month.
$80,000. Yeah, our water bills dropped by $6,500 a month the moment we fixed that leak. And then we fixed some others in the last month that I haven't seen the results yet, but,
How much of the water bill is a fixed cost? So if, if everybody used zero,
oh, okay, the fixed, so the bottom rate is, and it works out to be about 40, because there's a $20 per quarter, fixed fee, and then.
No, I think he means, if we were to remove all New Jersey American Water purchases, what would our budget be, right? Is that your question? If we need to purchase some water.
Currently, we've got a water department, right, and they get paid something. So my question is, if nobody used any water,
Right.
what would the water cost be annually?
Oh, and it was, in other words, the cost for just maintaining the whole distribution system irrespective of where the water came from?
Yeah, or people showing up for work because that's the department they work in.
Well, so last year, our total budget was what, about $680,000, and our water purchases were budgeted for 315, that ended up being 400,000 because of the leak. So over 50% was actually purchasing water. The cost of operating well number 4 at the wellhead is mostly the energy cost. I think the bill was about $20,000 last year. I mean, there's also treatment and other maintenance and so on. But then that's not the burdened cost for our water for what you're talking about, which is the cost for operating the whole distribution system, salaries, everything else. We have one full-time water system operator who then gets help from Public Works. And we have somebody who in the office is a part-time administrator who does the billing and the but that's, so one of the problems with buying the water is we have our what I call the burden cost of our water, which is a full distribution system operating cost. Then we're buying water commercially from somebody who's incorporating their overhead on all these things into their price. And obviously, they have an economy of scale that we can't have, having 2,000 people that we're serving versus hundreds of thousands or millions. But it means it's very uneconomical to buy water from that. If we were able to switch and produce all of our own water locally, you would have the operation and maintenance on the two wells, but we would probably be saving $250,000 a year.
And how about the other way? So is it possible that American Water could be 100%, could take over the entire system and be 100% of the water?
That is a
Well,
Yes, it's, and so, not to, let's get that in conversation, but one that we will start later this evening, so let me just preview that a little bit.
Yep.
We hired, months ago, a consultant, our Phoenix advisors to do a report. We, just got the okay to put it on the website, we'll be accepting it as something that we'll distribute out later this evening. The long and short is, if you, looking at what we need to invest in our system going forward, removing possibly the cost of purchasing water altogether from it, we still may be looking at a scenario where our rates are not competitive with what a private water company would be charging. And an important third part of this discussion for us is I hate to be technical and bifurcate these into different steps that we're taking tonight. But ultimately, as part of the same conversation, we are tonight accepting this report and sending it to the state, which is potentially the first part of a year-plus public process of analyzing whether it even makes sense for us to own a water system. The report that we have initially says there's some value in the system, either, as a sale. But if you were to look at what we believe, not this budget that we put together to try to mitigate the impact of this unconscionable increase, but ultimately what we believe we would need to invest in the system to do what we want, a new main on Broad Street, finishing our lead line process. That's not in this budget. Even with grants, we look at those things. Ultimately, that budget, it's not the 625 we thought last year would be. It's not the 800,000 or 900,000. Unfortunately, this year's has to be. It's a lot more.
Right.
And when you start comparing what New Jersey American is allowed to charge and what we in the coming years may need to think about charging, depending on how many grants we get, it gets us that we feel, that we need to at least look at, and then we'll literally be starting the process of the public conversation about what makes the most sense with this report from Phoenix Advice. But I think if I'm reading your point correctly, what New Jersey American is allowed by the state BPU to charge is different than what we're forced to charge. And in almost every case going forward, seems to be lower than what we have to charge.
Right. Right, that is my point. I mean,
Yes.
a mile down the road, the water is a third the price that it is.
Exactly.
Right,
Yes.
and exactly, and the thing is that, and that's not even taking into account all the other variables, just very quickly, I mean, it was arsenic, we took out one well, and then it changed the rules for radionuclides, and then PFAS, and it's like, well, what's the next thing that comes? If we don't have the ability to bond for it, to deal with in our little system.
Yeah, so my next comment is sort of attached to that. That's why I asked about the set cost, which is kind of what we're talking about here, which sounds like it's about $200,000-ish, give or take in terms of,
Closer to 3 or 4, I would say.
Yeah, because you've got. Oh, you mean the cost
fixed
irrespective of
costs, like
water production?
water department.
Yeah.
Guys driving trucks around, putting
Yeah.
diesel in the trucks, and that sort of thing.
Yeah.
And so you get into a bit of a catch-22 where the biggest users are the businesses, but then it becomes people not wanting to do business in town.
Right.
Because this becomes a real number. I mean, this is bigger than taxes in some places, so.
Yes.
That, that Franco's is offline, Brothers Moon is offline, the Bistro is offline, the theater is offline, the market was offline for a bit. That all adds up to 3 million gallons a year.
Well,
So-
I know, so Brick Farm, that was about $10,000 in revenue when you were operating
Right.
last.
Right,
And so economically, but the other thing is, I'll just interject it because it's part of our consideration. We also know that, I mean, if I'm a homeowner and I want to have a perfect green lawn, I can cut back on how much I water. But I'm pretty sure, I don't run a food establishment, but I'm pretty sure if I were, there's some real limitations on how much I could cut back and do all the things that I need to do, or if I were running a laundromat, whatever it is.
Right.
So that's also been part of it. We're not, we're not ignoring that.
Yeah,
But you're right. The other thing is, there's a supply demand issue here. You raise the rates enough and people are using less water and we get less revenue.
right, right. Well, yeah, so that gets back to the fixed cost, like the lower that is, obviously, and I
Yeah.
don't know, this is sort of my pitch that it makes sense to have American Water where you do away with some of those stuff,
I,
but.
Well, if I got
That-
news
but-
for you.
yeah,
But,
yeah.
So just to make one more comment quick, taking that into consideration as you're looking at your rate schedule, so if you're putting more burden on the businesses that are using the most water, you're getting deeper into that. Now people don't, now it becomes prohibitive to be a restaurant in the borough.
Which is not what we want.
We can have.
And then just one other comment on the resolution that if you make the bottom of the range wider, does that then give you flexibility to go back and change it without having to go through discussions again? So
Short answer, it could in the future. The range that we have now, is pretty wide, for the short period. The likelihood, if we were able to go
There it is.
lower than this range in the short term, I'd welcome it and we'll move heaven and earth to do the ordinance to allow it. This was more designed to allow us to, hit a moving target.
yeah, and my only comment is if it's designed to hit a moving target, you might as well make it wide enough that
Yeah, I mean,
you have the flexibility to go.
Fair enough. I'll just say from a technical perspective,
Yeah.
if we don't pass some form tonight, of something, we can't even introduce a budget because we actually have to sign off to the state and say that we have enough money to do it. So on the range part, that probably that would set us back another month or so to adjust the range.
Right, got it.
The other thing I'll say is if you took the lowest rates, if you just applied the lowest rates in that range across the board, you would not raise the $220,000 that we have. So the lower rate is definitely below where we need to be in pretty much any scenario. I mean, I suppose unless you're really bunching the cost onto,
Right.
two categories. So it was deliberately made to be as flexible as possible so that we can get past that, the mechanics of that, and then have the ability to arrive at a rate structure that works well as best it could.
Yeah.
Thank you, John.
Thank you.
Don?
Thank you. My name is Otto Zizak. I run Otto Burger, and you guys raised some historical facts about 65 East Broad Street and the revenue it generates. And I guess, I'm the first active business owner speaking here tonight about this issue. And I apologize in advance. Some of it may be venting, and I'll keep that to a very short minimum, but I want to take a minute to talk about, prohibitive is a good word that was raised. But just take a minute to talk about current rates and how they relate to the rest of my experience with water service and sewer service. Because unlike taxes and unlike some philosophical things like, we're in New Jersey and our real estate taxes are high and our schools are great and we're gonna deal with it and live with it. Water is a quantifiable service. And, I spent about 35 years at this point in New York City, which is previously to this, to being here, which is a highly dysfunctional municipality that imposes its will upon its residents. And my wife, who had to leave today to close our two restaurants in time, did some basic analysis of what we currently pay for water in buildings that we still own in New York City. Some of them are operated by restaurants. And the current rates are disproportionately lower in New York than they are what we pay right now. As an example, 65 East Broad Street currently under, the newly revitalized operation is projected to use about 145,000 gallons. And, which translates to a revenue of about $12,000, now 10. Per quarter, that's between $3,400 and $3,800 that we've been paying. For the same amount of usage, I'm paying in a building that's a high volume restaurant between $1,500 and $1,700 a quarter for water and sewer. My more immediate experience with American Water, I believe, is just looking at water per gallon cost at the Brick Farm Tavern is about half of what it is here. So, you know, getting back to the venting part, as a relatively new arrival here and as a business owner and a person who was poised to invest in this community, this is a variable that's being thrown at me unexpectedly, and I don't find it fair. Moving forward and having listened to the, presentation about rehabilitation and whatever the technical terms are, I question the long-term vision and impact of a business like this going away, other businesses working on a very, very thin margin, like we are. I think I picked up the comment of like, a business can adjust and question how much water they're gonna use. I don't think that's an option, frankly. So, a business like mine, that is really excited to be a part of the community and invest in one, working on a loss of X thousands of dollars per month, experiencing an increase in that loss, and me not being a rich guy and reaching into my savings is going to, result in a very brutal questioning of, am I going to continue or not? So, I'm not trying to be overly melodramatic, but factually speaking, comparing it to what other people in other municipalities pay for water, and questioning a long-term strategy in what we envision our town to be, I think these things should seriously be taken into consideration. Because a year's worth of budget deficit is one question, which I respect and think everybody's acting in good faith. And I'm sure you guys analyzed and then overanalyzed some of what could be done. But I think this could be a more serious and a deeper problem. And, my 2 cents is that all of that should be considered. I know John is a brilliant analytical guy, so his questioning of could we have a third party service it should 100% be considered. But, beneath that is just as a borough, as a town, I hope there's a haphazard decision like these guys are using most and are paying most. Let them front the bill. I want you to know today that there are layers to that. And, I'm an example of that. So thank you for allowing me to that.
And just quickly, I'll just mention that I will. So part of what you're pointing to is our total lack of economy of scale. I mean, it's a system for 2,000 people. New York City, obviously wonderful, and all these utilities, but I'll just say, we are considering very carefully all the options in terms of whether we can continue to operate the system at all. Precisely because I think we're reaching those limits. So sorry, Barry, I didn't mean to.
Barry Klein, owner of the Peasant Grill. Can you just switch back to that graph?
Oh, the bar chart? Yeah.
Yeah, no,
This one? There it is,
No.
that one, yeah.
I don't care about that.
This one?
It's fine.
Oh, that's one, yeah.
It shows, so I'm probably about 150,000 gallons, because we actually wash our dishes. We're actually happy with that. And sometimes we wash them twice, because I'm such a problem in the kitchen, I'm like, just run it again. I agree with almost everything that everybody else said, except I think that people will cut their usage, and I think you guys will still have a shortfall.
Oh.
Personal thing, because I know I'll cut my usage. we'll just give you dirty dishes.
Or you want.
We would never,
But
but I won't run the dishwasher twice, and we'll use the three-bay sink system, which is allowed by the code. I can't stand it, I think it's terrible, but it saves half the water. You know, so I'm gonna go from a bill of $2,600 a quarter to half of the $4,100,
Because you'll use those.
right? So you're not gonna cover the shortfall, maybe I'm wrong, but that's how I see it.
Me,
However, there's a lie here. You're showing us that it's a 54% increase, right? Or in my range, let's call it 54%, right? But if you go back to the chart before this, that one, you're showing us a range of 22 to 32, and you're gonna try to adopt that to give you the privilege of picking where in that range you wanna be. Well, $32 is not 54% more than 1806,
77%.
right?
I'm sorry, which number are you pointing to on that?
You're giving us a range, I'm over
Yeah, I know, I
40,000
understand
gallons, right? You're telling me, well, I don't know if you can see that, it's gonna be a 54% increase, which is actually not even unconscionable, it's actually criminal, it's usually, but whatever, you got a shortfall, you gotta cover it. But you're showing me a 54% increase, but if you go back to the other chart, that one,
Okay,
$32 proposed rate changes, that range, $32 is not 54% more than $18.
that's right. So I'll explain why, if you go back.
So that you can charge us more.
No, it's not a
No.
lie. I'll tell you exactly what it is. So if you go back to this, okay. So you have to, and it's a little complicated. So the way this chart is set up, under each use category, right? Let's say if you're less than 2,000, it's calculating what your cost would be under each
I
of those.
understand all that.
Okay, so on the right, you're summing across that row.
I understand.
Okay, the percentage that is shown there is the difference between the cost under the new rates across all of those categories.
I understand.
Okay, that math is correct. Believe me, I've checked it 100
on your
times.
first 2,000
But
gallons, you
could
had
that number
0%.
Go up to 32,
Right.
say
Your
that
last-
26,
Right.
could be
I'm saying it
32.
went up to 30.
Right.
Correct.
Yeah, you're taking that.
We don't have that.
My other thing, and, you know, we've been in town for 17 years and we've been through it all.
Right.
I'm sure you guys all remember the Nancy Snyderman incident. But we've been through a lot of stuff. We've been through the road closure, we've been through the pandemic. When I saw this, and at first I thought that it was unfairly skewed towards us, but even if you use an even thing, it wouldn't change the bigger numbers all that much, so I apologize to my friends for pointing that out. But when we saw this, like Otter said, it was the first time in 17 years that my wife and I said, you know what, maybe this just isn't worth it. You know, basically, I woke up this morning, I came here and you guys want $6,000 more this year from me. We're just a family. I mean, we're a business, we have a successful business, but $6,000, you know, we employ families in the borough. I don't know what's gonna happen, we wanna stay here, but at some point, it's the last straw, at some point. You know, and I understand, you have to raise the money. There's no good answer, but I just wanna say here in front of you guys tonight, that this unfortunate situation was the first time in 17 years that my wife and I sat down and said, you know what, maybe this isn't for us. And it's not, like Otter said, it's not a threat.
No,
It's just a reality.
I remember there was a time when you almost did leave because you couldn't find the right place and then
We almost did.
you almost
We
did.
love it.
I know, and we were talking a lot.
But that's a pretty, I mean, I don't know the right answer, you know? I think the best answer is to buy the water for less money.
Yeah.
So,
From New Jersey American Water, and not
Well-
try to play water people. Like,
No,
you guys
no,
don't have to
Yeah, and I'll
produce
say,
water.
no, you're right. I mean,
It's ridiculous.
here's where.
I heard
Yeah.
off the record from somebody that should have been taken care of 4 or 5 years ago. Perhaps, but
hindsight is
That's just
20/20,
me,
perhaps.
yeah.
I will tell you this, Barry, because for many years, we were committed to keeping this water system. I was the guy like in the bridge over the River Kwai, won't blow up the bridge, right? Because, you know, it was like, and the reason was because we were able to provide a level of service to our customers in terms of if anything goes wrong, if you've ever had an issue, right? You call the water department, you got our water director, or you can call your councilman, you can yell at him, whatever it is you want to do. But, you know, it's not like a giant utility, and we thought that was valuable, but you can't have that at any cost, right? So for many years, before we got to this stage, it seemed like that was worth it, but then you have to make a decision, well, how much really is it worth? The other thing is, you can't predict in the future how far rates are gonna go up once you hand over the keys. There was always that, well, if we hand over the system to somebody else, then we completely lose control. But now we're obviously being brought to really confront this in very real terms, and, there's no question about it. And we have been actually in the process of a fiscal analysis of looking at keeping the system versus selling the system for over a year. It's taken a long time to get the engineering information together and the fiscal information to do it, but it's kind of coming to a head now. That was before we realized we were in such dire straits this particular year. But at some point you have to say, are we serving our customers well at these prices or not? And when our businesses are saying, I may not be afford to stay here, that's one of the worst things that could possibly happen. I mean, and so believe me, that is, and there's gonna be a lot more about that in the coming months. There's a whole process of discussion. We're gonna have a town-wide, discussion about the pros and cons of keeping or selling the water system. And I'm sure you're all gonna be here, and I hope you are, because it's very important. And we're already heading down the path of that analysis. So.
Can you expand on so it would be a sale of the.
Well,
system?
two things. So first, Barry, to your point, and to the other business owner's point. I have a commitment from us that while this is necessary to, as a stopgap, to continue to try to find ways to have these rates not be what they have to be this year. And that we're hopeful there. And whether that means somehow just adjusting them again next year, or exploring the sale of the system. And you will hear John later in this meeting, but I'll preview it now. We are accepting a report that is the first step to go through what's called the WIPA process, the wastewater
Water Infrastructure Protection Act.
which would allow us to negotiate and possibly sell the system. It is a solid year that we would be starting of public meetings, working with the state, and eventually negotiating with a private system, with the end goal. Frankly, I think both of you said this. You look at what you, or at least Otto and John, you've had facilities in town and with New Jersey American out of town. You know exactly what it costs for water here and there. Our goal is not to be charging more for water than what someone else can charge. I can tell you that right now. And as quickly as we can get to that point, if that's a goal or available to us, we're putting the things in motion to get to that point. It is at least a year. I'll just say it now. On May 13th, we will be announcing a town hall to talk about the first steps, which is taking this report that we got from our professionals that basically says, here's some value in your system. Here's what it would look like to sell it. Here's the process to go at it. On May 13th, which is after our next council meeting, we'll talk about it then too. We will have a town, a meeting like this, but essentially just on this topic, to confirm from the town's perspective that we meet the criteria to go through this sales process. What I'm hearing from everyone here tonight is you probably agree that that's probably the way to go and to explore, but that there are technical milestones we need to meet. And as soon as we saw this, we started putting them into place. May 13th would be the first formal piece of that, aside from a resolution that we're gonna pass later tonight. When I say there's 3 buckets of things with this water, no pun intended, it's why there's this shortfall now, what our limited options are, and Barry, I really appreciate your candor on these both and its effect on you, and recognizing honestly that a small change on the few people that don't use a lot of water isn't gonna move the needle on the high end really much at all, unfortunately, and we looked at that and it doesn't. And then the third bucket is, what is our process? Where can we go with this to, if it makes sense, to not be in this business anymore, if someone else can do this more efficiently than us? And the first piece of that happens later tonight.
2 more quick points. My wife and I live in Frenchtown, and our water bill is probably about half what the average household in this town is, and it's New Jersey American Water. Number 2, we have talked about it. We would never put a credit card surcharge on our next at the restaurant. A lot of us are doing it next there, right? We would never do that, but we are gonna have a water surcharge.
I'll volunteer for the bike shot that you put on the placard.
Yeah, so the water won't be free when I go get the pitcher when I come in.
Not for you, David.
No, I have to pay triple, but today.
I'm Nathaniel Davidson. I own the Hopewell Wanderers. We use a lot of water. The only way to use less water for us would be to do less business, which is not an option. So I kind of feel like we got cornered on this one. I'm just beating the bush basically, but a 54% increase is just, it's ridiculous. We're seeing increases in all other areas of our expenses. We've only been there since the coronavirus started, so we didn't really come in at a good time. We're trying to advertise, but it's kind of hard when we have these other expenses that are escalating to this degree. I guess my biggest concern really is that these are going to continue to rise. These are unattainable rates. And it just really doesn't give us much of an outlook. Again, I have nowhere to turn for this. We provide service to a lot of the poor people in the neighborhood. So they're coming to our laundromat to do laundry where they don't have the option anywhere else also. We've already had to increase our rates substantially. We're basically going to be to the point where I think they're gonna have to go other places, which is gonna cost them more also with fuel and everything, but, you know, people make a big deal over a quarter at where I work, so, you know, I don't know how else to, divert the expense. It's gonna be at least a $2,000 increase quarterly for me. We have a pretty low profit margin to begin with. So aside from working all the time, which I mostly do already, we don't have any other stores that we own. I don't have a lot of options as far as extra money and bank accounts that are hidden, maybe, I don't know. I have 5 children, so this is pretty devastating for me. I had to quit my full-time job to go work at the laundromat because we don't have enough walk-in business. We're trying to expand our business in other areas, but you know, these huge increased expenses are really limiting for us. And I know, you know, like I said, we can't use less water. It's not.
You have energy, you have water, and you have your machines, and there's no way to make. Yeah.
So I appreciate what you guys are doing as far as stopping the leaks and complete wastes of water. I just feel like I don't know, I haven't been to these meetings before, so I don't really know what's been done in the past so much, but it just sounds like the ball's kind of gotten passed along, and it's at our feet here. So, you know, I look forward to better solutions, I guess, and hope that we can find something that's more sustainable and isn't as devastating on our commercial businesses, because, you know, it's just echoing what's been said. We're really making it difficult for commercial businesses to stay in business here. It's not competitive. So that's a big fear I have as far as the shortcomings also for the expectations and whatnot. And I just, you know, I appreciate everybody's work on it. But just seems like I wish there were other options, you know?
Yeah.
So that's it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And again, you've got our commitment that we will be looking at this as often as we can. We will not be waiting another year to figure this out. We will be looking at it as soon as possible for options to change these rates back in the right direction once that shortfall is picked up. And to start,
This is not tenable.
No.
it is not.
Hi, Rachel Bourne, Hopewell Borough resident. first time caller, long time listener. I wanted to follow Nathaniel because I actually was coming tonight to really talk about the inequity that's present. There's a two-part inequity on the laundromat. I mean, the histogram, you know, it's a big range on who's the last 40. But how many are actually within the 150 to 175? And how much of that is the laundromat? You know, this family, if you've ever used the laundromat, this family will steal your heart. They're there all day. And then the community you meet at night. I mean, it is the hub of our community. And those who use the laundromat, we are some of the most under-resourced in this town. And so it's an inequity to the laundromat who needs to stay open, who is the most probably, I'm just guessing, probably the biggest user. And then the people who use it, again, another inequity. And I know there's something we can do. I get we need to raise money, but if they're gone, it's really only so much you can raise at that point from that business. Is there a way we could, I don't know, raise donor funds, fundraise for this business? Is there a way that we could put a checkbox when you're paying your water bill, if you'd like to, you know, donate money, $100 to go to the laundromat, whatever it is, there's gotta be something we can do to help the laundromat. EDC advocating for them, finding a solution. I get that the increase is gonna be big for them, but is there something we can do as a community, as business owners, as residents, as council? Is there something we can do to help them out?
I think we'd all like to do that, and I think you'd have our commitment to work with us on an individual basis on trying to figure that out for them or any one of our businesses. I don't want to speak too much about what we legally can do as a town. Many of those things are not options from a governing body perspective, but from us personally, to help you and our businesses on that. And secondly, again, to recommit to every possible chance or program or revisiting these rates as quickly as possible so that this impact is as short as possible. You have that commitment from the governing body and from all of us personally to help you on anything you can think of or that any of our businesses can think of to make this work. Thank you.
Can I add something from EDC? Just as the EDC representative and also from not as the governing body, but as downtown Hopewell. I would love for the EDC and to sit down and just brainstorm to the best of our ability. And like Ryan said, there may not be things that we can do through official you know, but I want to leave absolutely no stone unturned in figuring out a way to help the small businesses, because our small businesses are what make this town thrive. Personally, I'm going to use this as a reason to be lazy and have the laundromat do my laundry. They do wash and fold, you know, but and to remember to patronize our restaurants and to just give back to these businesses that give to us. So that are part of our community. So
Thank you.
thank you.
Good.
Lynn Ferrugia, I own Chubby's. I just want to say thank you. Thanks to everybody else who has spoken. I can't say much more except that if the town doesn't consider small businesses as we all begin this redevelopment plan, we're gonna be in big trouble. This is a huge, huge increase for all of us, and the laundromat especially. I was thinking the same thing, that the people who are gonna suffer the most are not the wealthy. I mean, you may think that the businesses are the wealthiest in town, but the profit margin is so narrow that this hits us proportionately harder. And I can't say more than that, except that it was a shock when I saw it. And it's a shock that it begins so quickly. Like, I don't know. I mean, it's been happening for a year and a half. And all of a sudden, we found this out just now. You know, it's a big deal. So I just want to say that, and that I hope that there's a way that small businesses can be more involved and feel respected. Because it kind of felt like a slap in the face, like, whoa, 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 that's a lot. Anyway, that was it for me. Thanks.
Mark Boga, I just wanna, Mr. Mackey, you mentioned the fire department. We had a fire today. We filled up all of our trucks on Province Line Road in Montgomery Township. We don't use much water. And what water we use at the fire department, 70% is paid by the township.
Right.
So the use of our water for a fire department is very, very low. You know, I think we use the most water when we do our pancake breakfast, but.
Well, you have, your water's metered at the firehouse, so we.
Yeah, we pay, and the
Yeah.
commissioners pay, and
Yeah.
70% of that bill is paid by the township.
Right.
So as far as the impact on the borough, it's very little.
Oh, no, I wasn't suggesting that was it.
And then when we do the big water fills, we make it our effort, you know, you also have to figure 4 miles to the gallon on diesel fuel.
Right.
You know, we go as close as we can, which is Province Line Road, and it doesn't cost the borough anything. I just wanna make that.
No,
clear.
well, thank you.
Public.
Yeah, for later, Mark and I, you and I should talk, because I try to account for all the little. Not on a cost basis, but just where the water goes, and that's one area where I'm completely ignorant, so you.
Okay, just walk down the street.
Okay.
Can I just have a quick second,
Sure.
Terry? So there's a lot of authentic emotion and, you know, business owners. My feeling is we're a little behind in addressing what is the elephant in the room right now. And to Lynn's point, it needs to be done immediately. It was unexpected. We, you know, slapped in the face. I think putting all the emotion aside for a second, to be productive, we find ourselves in a place that's unrealistic as far as the rates are concerned. What is the speediest, most productive way of bringing them to a realm of acceptance? Because, you know, we can vent a lot. And I know there are steps, and I know, you know, the sale of the utility, but again, not to be redundant, this is a specific service, a specific quantifiable entity that, to David's point, that there was a comment made, well, if we lose control of it, then we lose control of the rates. Well, there's a market equilibrium that dictates it, right? So if the rest of American water rates go in a certain direction, and perhaps cost of laundry services will as well, and cost of hamburgers and so on and so forth. So would it not be wiser to participate in that marketplace as a small town like this? So my last 2 cents are accelerate that process, please. So as business people, we can work within a realm of expectation that's reasonable and not have this happen to us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Sure.
Hi, Melissa Cookman. It's so opposing things that we're trying to do in the town right now. We are trying desperately to fill all our empty storefronts. And work on redevelopment and rehabilitation. And if any new business wanted to come in here and is looking at what the utility cost is, why would they come? So the reason I'm saying that, we all know that, is what's the fastest way to correct the situation?
So,
To make the situation at least better?
so, I'll say there's 2 parts to that. One, a little bit, we hinted with what our planner was talking about. We want to get things in place that give us the tools to be more creative with development and taxes for our businesses and projects downtown. We don't have those tools now. We talked about them a bit earlier today. We want to have them. There's things we'd like to be doing. If we could do some kind of tax abatement for businesses, I'm sure we would vote for it. The mechanism doesn't exist yet.
Right.
We're putting those things in place. That was the beginning of this meeting. The part that will come after we unfortunately have to slodge through this rate increase, and I mean literally right after, because we'll do a resolution, is setting the things in motion to look at those options, and not just look at them, accept a report from our professionals and start in motion what it would look like to potentially sell the system and get, I think there were several extremely good points about here, you know, there's, on one hand, you think, well, gosh, we would lose control of our rates. These rates are out of control. We can't control these because what we have to charge is a function of our costs. And if we can't control our costs, we cannot control our rates. New Jersey American, we as a town don't control what they do, but they have to go to the state BPU and make a rate case. And there are lots of people, they don't always win. They do increase their rates. They're doing an increase of 25%. Come September, so their rates aren't staying the same. But they're certainly increasing at a rate that's less than we're looking at here. And we're, again, I don't mean to say not to foreshadow, and I tried to be a little flexible with this meeting and talk about all these things at once in one kind of public session. We will formally adopt this resolution in a few minutes, I suppose, after the public comment. But as quickly as we can get into that process, we're looking at about a year, is realistically what it sounds like.
A year to 18 months,
Yeah.
right? I mean.
So
Anything around
these
that.
businesses could all leave before that.
They could
I
be
mean,
tomorrow. I mean,
But this is the
you're right.
process that we're following because we feel like this will get us the most value for our utility.
Right.
And
I
that's,
just, I just
yeah, no,
concerned
and I totally
because
understand
it's,
that. Yeah,
The two
you know,
options.
we refer to
are-
ourselves as a restaurant town.
no, and it's, I mean, these rates, it's not tenable. We
Right.
cannot continue functioning this way. You all as business owners know that as a resident, if these rates, if I have to move, if these rates get much higher, I can't afford this.
Right,
People who are thinking about living in this town have to consider their water bill.
right.
If
When
they
you look
can
at the,
afford to live here, it's out of hand. So.
so and there's no
looking at
way to make it faster?
The price we're going through is the fastest one available. And the one
And
most
gives
likely
the
to
most
give us.
value.
Yes, we could, the two options are, put it up for a referendum immediately. That would mean well, not immediately, we'd have to wait for the next election. And then we would essentially be saddled with whatever, it's what's called more like an RFP, right? So we put out for bids, whoever the water company says, well, we'll give you $50 for it, we'll give you 5 million. Our options are accept or decline.
Okay.
The process we're going through could be faster than that. And when we get to that point, we put out what we think it's worth. We get to negotiate with them and try to get something that makes sense for the community
So I
rather
don't
than
know,
just.
I'm sorry, I didn't interrupt you. I don't know how it all works, but is there no, method to legally, like, is there something that we can say, look, this is our town is in a state of emergency? Can this move faster?
So this literally, yes, but the faster is what unfortunately we just described.
What we're talking about, yeah.
This resolution will put into a process where we'll have a report that ultimately on May 13th, when we have this town hall meeting, we will decide as a community, is this an emergency? I'm hearing from everyone and you'll hear from us. The answer is yes.
Yeah.
But we have to give everyone 30 days notice of this and send it to the state. But ultimately, that's literally what the statute had contemplated. Is this so bad that it's emergency? Yes, and then they open the door for us to be able to negotiate rather than just put out there and have the utility say, again, what, take it or leave it for the deal. And we feel that that's both the fastest and what will get us the most value for the system. This report, we clicked on it, during the meeting here, it's up on the website. It's kind of an appraisal. It says our system is worth something. We hope it is. And it's not just that. And honestly, if these were our rates have to be going into the future, we just gave it away, they're not listening, it would be better off for our ratepayers, to pay less. That's not, we're looking at something much better than that,
Right,
paying lesser rates and getting some value that we can turn into tax relief or other things, retired debt in town, and make a positive out of it, but that's the next step, and you're right, it is an emergency, and literally, May 13th, we will all convene to decide whether we agree with our engineers and our financial advisor that it literally is an emergency, and I will have to sign something that says that.
okay. We can all sign it, we'd be happy to sign it. A petition, yeah, and because obviously the restaurants and laundromat and those places are much more profoundly affected. But you go on the Facebook pages and you already say, people, I can't live here anymore, can't afford it, so, and when you go to sell your house, you have to put down what your utilities are. That becomes prohibitive, so, thank you.
Thank you.
Sorry, not to prolong, but can you just explain what
The process?
yeah, because you keep saying sale, so if American Water were to take over the system, it would not be.
The reality is, there are several options, one of which is to have an outside vendor operate the system for you. After talking to our professionals, no operators want to do that anymore, and there's almost no value to a town to engaging in it that way.
Well, or they're venture.
And you lose control of your rates.
Correct, yeah, I mean, there are venture capital companies that will do that, you can lease it to them,
Right.
but apparently you still have all the regulatory burdens that go with it, you're still on the hook because you own the system. And if any little thing changes, they're able to, renegotiate their costs. So the advice to us was don't even think about it. And the utility isn't interested in operating as a lessee. They're only interested in buying it, because I think they want to expand their territory. That's the short answer to that. So really, we're looking at keeping it, what I call the stay put scenario, or selling the asset. Those are really the realistic choices that we have.
And the selling of it would be to American Water too. So if American Water were to take it over,
Well,
they would buy the system.
In theory, if you think about it, there are basically three really large utilities like Veolia, New Jersey American, and somebody else, I can't remember. And they already have an interconnection with us.
Right.
This is in their region.
Yeah.
So if another person bought the system, they're gonna be buying water from New Jersey American from their competitor. It doesn't really make sense. So they already have an advantage. But they also have a reason why they would want our system, because if you look at their service areas, and they've said this, they want to expand into Hopewell Township, and we're like a gateway for them. So I think strategically, we have some value. That's not, I'm not an expert on this, but there's some possibilities.
And I'll suggest we literally, because we met with them in executive session before this meeting and are adopting a resolution to set this in motion, there's a report that's on the front page of our website as of tonight, from Phoenix Advisors that, it's a good read. Most of it is just explaining what the options are, how these processes work. And then it's interesting to me, and always I think that it's this upfront, but we start with almost an appraisal. So I mean, it actually goes through and values our system, which is, we're told, frankly, gets us the best result. You're not gonna get a bid, a lowball bid when it's already kind of known what the parameters are. And which is what this WIPA process is meant to get for us.
So just my take on this whole thing is the business owners are, me still being one of them, are in the situation where if the water bill tomorrow was half the price, it would be a savior, right? And so for us, I don't think it matters whether you sell it for 0, for $1 million, for 10 million, that money's not coming back to us,
Right.
and tomorrow makes a difference.
Understood. So our goals are the best value and the fastest process, both of which happen to be the same based on our experts.
Is the WIPA process.
Okay.
And it's all reviewed by, the state has to approve it. So you have to basically say, we have what's called emergent conditions. That's our term for an emergency. We can meet those criteria, that's part of this work we've done. Then it goes to the state. So there's a whole series and it's all gonna be discussed and.
And Barry, just before you start, one other thing, John, if there is value in the system, and we believe there is, and a sale, the statute requires it first retire the debt from the water system and then municipal debt. So, I would imagine most business owners, if they're owner occupied, that would come ultimately in tax relief. If they're tenants, if it's passed through, that would be relief as well to our businesses, if that were to be the case. So it's, the statute requires that the funds, retire debt, and that would end up being tax relief as well. Sorry, Barry.
I just want to clarify. We kind of had a disagreement where I said that the other chart, which you don't have to show me again.
Yeah.
But where the proposed increase, you could show me. I don't know where the number.
I'm trying to find my cursor here. Hold on.
Not that one, that
This one,
that
yeah.
So over 40,000 I'd use, because that's where I am.
Yeah.
Proposed increase of 22 to 32, right? But then we go back, and that's a range, and then we go back to this one. Are you telling me that I misunderstand it and that you're guaranteeing that the rate will not be higher than 54% higher?
So what we're saying is the range allows us to go to I forgot what it is already, 20
To 32.
to 32. We're actually setting it at 26.
20,
It's getting set.
But
28.
Okay.
27.
That's the actual rate.
And that's it, that's
Yes,
the
No,
number.
but that's not the rate for all your wood. That's the rate.
I
for
understand.
The most
Right.
expensive one.
In
I
order to
understand
raise
what's the
it,
tax
we would
rate.
have to have another,
Right.
we would have to pass into us a new resolution in order
Yes.
to go up to the
Well-
32, which we have no intentions of.
And it's more, our intention is more likely to go as soon as we possibly could lower in that range, to be honest.
That's,
All right,
Yeah,
that was my question. So that's the number,
Yeah.
50.
Correct,
Yeah.
correct. Does anyone else in person, would like to make a comment? I'm looking at my cursor and I'm gonna look for a show of hands. Anyone, online, via Zoom, want to raise your hand? Otherwise, our next step here asked to close this public discussion. Do I have a second?
Second.
All right, all in favor? So to go back technically to where we were, we did, attempt to kind of simplify things, let everyone speak on all these issues at once. We are now actually still at item 11. So, which will also have a public hearing on, will be largely duplicative of what we just talked about, but, Reggie, if you could, ordinance 881, read by title.
An ordinance of the Borough of Hopewell, County of Mercer, New Jersey, regarding water and sewer rates and amending chapters 10 and 17 of the revised general ordinances of the Borough of Hopewell, 1975.
Yeah, with apologies, I'll ask that we all accept the hour-plus long explanation that we just did, on that, and I will now, open the meeting to the public again on the, ordinance that would allow the range of rates, up here. Seeing none from the, in-person floor here, I'll ask if there's anyone on Zoom. Seeing no hands on Zoom, I'll ask for a motion to close the public hearing.
No motion.
Second.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
I'll begrudgingly ask for a motion to adopt ordinance 881.
So moved.
Thank you, David.
Second.
Deb, thank you. We've got a roll call on this.
Mr. Mackey,
Yes.
Ms. McCullough,
Yes.
Ms. Steeler,
Yes.
Ms. Weaver,
Yes.
I'm sorry, what was that?
Yes.
Ms. Lanius.
Thank you all. Again, we discussed and explained things a little out of order, but now technically we are going to adopt a resolution, or I'm gonna ask for a motion to adopt a resolution that would set this set of rates that we've just discussed for the last hour or so. Item 12.
Is there any discussion that we want to have as a council about?
Well, how about this? I'll take a motion and, and then, if there, we'll pause and have further discussion. Deb, motion?
Yeah.
Second,
Did you second that?
I do second.
Oh,
Heidi.
I'll second,
All right.
sure, I'll second that.
Now, before taking a vote, we'll open this up on council to discuss, any further discussion on this resolution.
Yeah, I just wanna say that I think none of us are happy about where we are, and it would be really, it would look good if we could, vote no, but we can't. We can't do that to our town, but I think we are all committed up here to, mitigating this as quickly as we're able. I mean, we can't go backwards in time and change the series of events that got us here. And voting no and leaving us, leaving our town in financial ruin is also not an option. It would be lovely to be able to pull from reserves. We're not allowed to do that. We can only spend our water. And it's really, I just want to, say that, yeah, just because we're gonna approve these rates, doesn't mean we're gonna sit back and let them sit here. We're still gonna, keep chipping away at them, keep fighting it. That's all. That's what I wanted to say.
Well said, well said. Heidi.
Yeah.
Unless there's any further discussion, I guess I'll call over.
I'm gonna do a roll call.
Thank you.
Mr. Mackey,
Yes.
Ms. McCullough,
Yes.
Ms. Steeler,
Yes.
Ms. Weaver,
Yes.
Ms. Lanius.
Yes.
Since we are in this part of the topic, I'd like to perhaps ask for a motion on resolution 2024-56. While it's fresh in everyone's mind, this is the, from our consent order, our consent motions, but this is the resolution accepting the report of Phoenix Advisors, and their initial analysis of our water system. I think we talked about that during that admittedly meandering public discussion on these three items, but this is the resolution that we formally accept, not on a content perspective, but that we've received and will now send to the state a report from our professionals about our water system that explains what some of the options are, does a preliminary value, and explains what some of, Ms. Cookman actually noted, some of the things that might be determined or considered to be an emergency. That would allow us to go through this expedited process to potentially sell the system. The actual hearing on that, we will set, and with a lot of notice to the world, but here now, May 13th, it's a Monday, that's a special town hall meeting that we will have. We will also be discussing this at our next regular meeting as well, and every other regular meeting until this problem is solved. But the special meeting on this will be May 13th. With that, I'd like to take a motion on,
I'll motion.
thank you, 2024-56. Deb, thank you for the motion.
I'll second that one.
All right, Heidi, second, we'll do a roll call on that one.
Mr. Mackey?
Yes.
Ms. McCullough?
Yeah.
Ms. Steeler?
Yes.
Ms. Weaver?
Yeah.
Ms. Lanius?
Yeah.
Okay, now we're on to item 13, first reading of ordinance 882.
An ordinance replacing chapter 19 of the revised general ordinances of the Borough of Hopewell, 1975 as amended, entitled Stormwater Management.
So we dealt with several other ordinances of the mandatory state requirement nature in stormwater. The DEP has changed their rules and has asked every, voluntold every municipality, I suppose, to do these things. Doug, I believe you've had our professionals and our engineer tweak this one a bit. Anything you want to say about that from an introduction perspective?
Yeah, this isn't a boilerplate from the state, our engineer took a look at it and tried to craft it, more for Hopewell. We do have some more work to do that we need to get back to, but we know what those items are. But we have a deadline to get this, implemented, with the state, so we're gonna pass it with the revisions that we made, knowing that it's a living document and we'll be revisiting it.
All right, with that, I'll take a motion to introduce 882 with the expectation the public hearing would be at our May meeting.
So moved.
Second, Samara, thank you.
Mr. Mackey? Ms. McCullough?
Yes.
Ms. Steeler?
Yes.
Ms. Weaver?
Yes.
Ms. Lanius?
Yes.
Let's do number
Yeah.
item 14, ordinance 883, first reading for Hart Avenue, phase 1 and 2.
Bond ordinance providing for phase 1 and phase 2 of the Hart Avenue project in and by the Borough of Hopewell in the County of Mercer, New Jersey, appropriating $1,104,848 therefore, and authorizing the issuance of $1,104,848 bonds or notes of the borough to finance part of the cost thereof.
Brandon, do you, I don't know if you have a number in front of us, how much of that is covered by our two municipal aid grants versus,
$693,598.
so
Thank you.
300,000, it's usually the way it works out, is
Yeah.
the state pays for about 2/3 and we pay for about a third, right?
So we have the grants in hand, this is just providing
Yeah.
the funding for us to move the project forward.
Right, because those have the bond for the whole nickel,
Right.
so.
Look for a motion to introduce 882.
So moved.
And second,
Second.
okay, Deb?
Mr. Mackey?
Yes.
Ms. McCullough?
Yes.
Ms. Steeler?
Yes.
Ms. Weaver?
Yes.
Ms. Lanius?
Yes.
Next, item 15, ordinance 884, first reading for our cap bank. This is part of our annual budget process, but Reggie, if you want to read by title?
Borough of Hopewell, County of Mercer, calendar year 2024, ordinance to exceed the municipal budget appropriations limit and to establish a cap bank. NJSA 40A:4-45.13.
So we get a better explanation from our CFO at our May meeting when we actually have a public hearing on our budget. But Doug, you want to give us the 30-second version of what this is? And it's
This allows, the normal cap, the basic cap is 2.5, this allows us to go up to 3.5. We're not going up 3.5, but what it allows us to do is the difference between what we actually use for the cap and the 3.5, we can bank. And so if we ever have an emergency, things like that, we can bring those funds into the budget and use them and still be under cap, so establishes the cap.
And ultimately, procedurally, it's something we do every year.
Yes, it's a housekeeping item that the state recommends that every municipality do.
Thank you. I'll take a motion to introduce 882. Second, Deb, thank you.
Mr. Mackey?
Yes.
Ms. McCullough? Yeah. Ms. Steeler?
Yes.
Ms. Weaver?
Yes.
Ms. Lanius?
Yes.
All right, item 16, ordinance 885, first reading on our street opening permit rules.
An ordinance of the Borough of Hopewell, County of Mercer, New Jersey regarding excavations and road openings in municipal streets and amending chapter 8 of the revised general ordinances of the Borough of Hopewell, 1975.
And my understanding, this is a joint effort of our engineer and attorneys, or maybe it's entirely our attorneys, perhaps, or heavily on her, but to spruce up our street opening and moratorium rules. Basically, when we do new pavement, the world gets told about it, and it's cut into that before we repave it. Otherwise, hold your peace for 5 years. This kind of modernizes our processes and rules for that. Is that fair, Lisa?
It is, and it just, based on, actually some of Doug's great experience, he identified several areas where the borough's ordinance could be improved. And certain things come up all the time. Let's see, for instance, some of the moratorium, obviously, and the fee schedule for actual cuts into the roads within the 5 years. The fees are just going to be allocated differently, and the money from the openings during, if and when they're ever necessary, that money is going to go into kind of a bank that's going to be used for improvements elsewhere. So, but I don't think the fees are going to change all that much overall. And I'm missing, I know there's some really important aspects. Doug?
Just the method of the repair,
Right, the
some
method.
professional repair that we asked utility companies to do.
Right.
And this is kind of looking forward. I got a call from the gas company saying they might want to be running some new lines, so we want to make sure that they're repairing the roads properly after they do their work.
Good idea.
Yes, we don't have a huge sinkhole after they're done.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then even when you have a smaller cut, I know you said that there's the ability to require, if it is within the moratorium, to make a larger cut, just so you're really respecting the new road. Because so it's a lot of changes like that to recognize the realities of kind of damage that really is done by constantly opening the road. So ensuring that you maintain the roads better.
Great.
Thank you. With that, I'll take a motion to introduce 885.
So moved.
Second.
Mr. Mackey?
Yes.
Ms. McCullough?
Yes.
Ms. Steeler?
Yes.
Ms. Weaver?
Yes.
Ms. Williams?
Yes.
Thank you. Next, I'll take an omnibus motion of 2024 51 through 57 minus 56, which we've already done separately as part of the one. I'll just note, I want to thank Lisa. We've done it here tonight, but the resolution allows us to 57 kind of more officially introduce interactive hybrid Zoom features to our meeting. So I'm much appreciative of everyone for that and for the technical help that's gone into making that work. And if anyone else has any other pieces they'd like to ask a question about or pull out, otherwise I'll take that.
I was just gonna say thanks to Doug for calling out the grant for the walking path in the bandstand park. So that's gonna be a great addition to our town. So, but I will do the omnibus motion. Unless anybody else has anything.
Thank you, Krista. Second, is this a roll call, Reggie? All right.
Mr. Mackey?
Yes.
Ms. McCullough?
Yes.
Ms. Steeler?
Yes.
Ms. Weaver?
Yes.
Ms. Williams?
Yes.
So item 18 is gonna, compared to what we've talked about this evening and the impact on people, it's gonna seem like a non-item. It is the resolution to introduce our budget. There will be a public hearing at our May meeting. Doug, I know you and Diane and the finance committee, and actually everyone this year on the council had an opportunity to meet and ask questions of our CFO, but if you want to give a 30-second overview, I know the real hearing will be next month, but I know a lot of work on your end went into this, so I appreciate it.
So for 2024, we have a 3.5 cent tax increase compared to the 4 cents we had last year. The budget provides for funding for road projects, other capital projects, and just using the average assessment of $400,000 home, it's the impact of the $140 annually, at $11.66 a month for the tax increase.
No, I'm hesitant to be excited about any tax increase, but compared to what we've been speaking of.
Yeah, exactly.
Relatively longer. So I'll take a motion to, I'll just say motion on resolution 58, I'll say it that way, we're adopting it. Anyone want to?
I will.
All right, Deb first, and Samara second.
Mr. Mackey,
Yes.
Ms. McCall?
Yes.
Ms. Steeler?
Yes.
Ms. Weaver?
Yes.
Ms. Williams?
Yes.
Item 19, I'll take a motion for claims for payment.
Second.
All in favor, sorry, roll call. Trying to truncate things here, sorry.
Mr. Mackey,
Yes.
Ms. McCall?
Yeah.
Ms. Steeler?
Yes.
Ms. Weaver?
Yeah.
Ms. Williams?
Yeah.
Next, and with apologies for some of you who've sat through a long meeting to see this, we've got two proclamations, one of which goes to a week they were actually in right now. So Reggie, if you have a copy of it and we have in for a penny, stay for $1, I don't know what the saying is, but might as well go through it and read this, because a proclamation in celebration of International Dark Sky Week. We're very appreciative of the volunteers involved in this, but how about this? I'll start, and would everyone like to take a stand in a paragraph? So,
Sure.
all right, whereas the aesthetic beauty and wonder of a natural night sky is a shared heritage of all humankind,
And whereas the experience of standing beneath the starry night sky inspires feelings of wonder and awe and encourages growing interest in science and nature, especially among young people, and
Whereas light pollution has scientifically established economic and environmental consequences which result in significant impacts on the ecology and human health of all communities, and whereas 80%.
Whereas 80% of the world's population, including the residents of Hopewell Borough, lives under a dome of light pollution, excessive artificial lighting at night that disrupts natural darkness, and may never experience the visual wonder, ecological, and health benefits of living under a dark sky, and
I suggest we just actually go back down, we'll repeat.
screen, here you go.
whereas light pollution represents a waste of natural resources amounting to roughly $3 billion per year of wasted energy in the United States and contributes to diminished energy security, and
Whereas our local area is home to many volunteers and advocates who have taken a leadership role in the borough community to raise awareness of these challenges and develop programs to mitigate light pollution, to whom Hopewell Borough wishes to extend its gratitude and appreciation.
And whereas Dark Sky International is a globally recognized authority on light pollution and has created International Dark Sky Week to raise awareness of light pollution and provide free education resources and solutions to the public to encourage the protection of and enjoyment of dark skies and responsible outdoor lighting. Now, therefore, I, Ryan Kennedy, Mayor of Hopewell Borough, do declare that April 2nd through 8th, 2024, as International Dark Sky Week, and we ask each resident of Hopewell Borough to join me not only in observing and pondering upon this important week, but also in raising awareness and support for protecting our precious dark sky resources and thanking our volunteers and advocates for advancing this important cause. Thank you. Particular thank you to our activists in the room here today. Thank you so much for what
For
you're
our
doing.
town physicists.
Yes.
It is also Arbor Day. We'll do that one by notice. We won't read that one in. We've got appointments. I believe one of our appointees here tonight. Congratulations, and thank you for stepping up and everything you're doing for our community. With that, item 22, Mayor and Council Liaison reports. Samara, you want to start?
I have so many, no, we can.
I want to keep it to a concise 45 minutes.
No, it's today, so I can try to be brief. So I attended Municipal Alliance meeting this week. As Board of Health liaison, the speaker was not able to be there, but they were from Princeton Parent Partnership, which is a support group for families, predominantly for parents and caregivers who are impacted by addiction. That group meets on Monday evenings in person from 7 to 8:30 at St. Paul's Church in Princeton, which is at 218 Nassau Street. For more information, if anyone's interested in, learning more about the group, the contact number is 609-468-8708. Also learned, in that meeting about the Youth Coalition of Mercer County, which is, youth standing up and speaking out against vaping and tobacco, and that is open to anybody aged 12 to 20. And then also a reminder with prom season coming up, Municipal Alliance is working again with the Parents Who Host Lose the Most campaign. I'll get the details for the website, a campaign bringing
Don't host
education.
parties, yeah.
Yeah, don't host parties. Yeah, and sorry, I'm like, I took notes and I still can't read them. Just a campaign on facts on underage drinking and alcohol, and that parents who host can be held liable if a student or teenager or somebody under 21 were to leave their home and hurt themselves or somebody else. Open Space did not meet this this month. The next meeting's on April 16th, and that will be with a representative from NJDEP's Green Acres program, so that's exciting. Department of Health did not meet either. The next meeting is on April 24th. But just a couple updates there, that they're putting out a new social support resources brochure, and are soliciting for any additional information that anybody might have that isn't already in the brochure. So that can be found on the Department of Health website under social services, and there's a contact number there if you take a look at the brochure and there's something that you feel might be missing there. And then just from a numbers perspective, and then I'm done, I promise, flu is up currently, COVID is holding steady, and RSV is down in our most recent health report.
All right, I'll do one for Sherry Hook, who could not be here this evening. The Hopewell Fire Department and the Emergency Services Group assisted in 2 major house fires last month. We have 2 new firefighters currently completing training, as well with water rescue training, 6 new EMTs, and the annual pancake breakfast will be held May 5th, which is their largest fundraiser for the department, so please come and support them, also with great food. Senior Advisory Board, they have some upcoming community connections presentations at Borough Hall, which are, I assume, listed on our website, April 5th, May 3rd, and June 7th. If they're not, I'll get them to Reggie. Hopewell Township Health Department is partnering with Wegmans to host 2 shingles vaccine clinics at Pennington Borough Municipal Hall, April 17th and June 19th. And then the Shade Tree Committee is putting together a tree fund program. The committee would like to get a green light from council this evening to move forward with the concept of a tree fund program. Many other neighboring municipalities offer similar programs, and basically, if you want to memorialize a loved one or an important event in your lives and you want to make or just want to make a gift to someone, the Hopewell could donate to the tree fund. A memorial tree, if desired, would be chosen from a list of local trees, and an inscribed granite stone with the name and dates of the honoree could be included, incurring an additional charge. So there'll be more information about that. We can put the details that I think the letter on time, but the Shade Tree Committee has been working on this for a while, so we're very excited. Because it's always a tough thing to get enough money to plant the amount of trees that we need to do in town, because we lose many more than we can afford to replace.
So let me just pause on that one for a second. So I told Sherry that, prior to, asking that the work went forward on this, that we just kind of take everyone's temperature. I thought it was a neat idea, but,
Excellent.
All right. So sounds like a positive reaction at this,
Okay.
no timeline, but,
Yeah.
amongst all the other million things we'll.
Right. And then for me, library board met on Tuesday. They're hard at work on strategic planning, updating the bylaws, planning a potential community gala for fundraising in the fall, and updating their policies, procedures, and personnel manuals. With the storms over the last 2 days, it was discovered there was a couple of more issues happening with the building. So Alan and Doug are helping out with that to see what we can pinpoint what the issues are, because the rain was coming in sideways. And let's see, the recreation department, we haven't met recently, but we're starting to gear up for all the events that are gonna be happening in May. And then, building committee has not met recently, but we're all excited about the, construction coming up for the train station. That's all I have.
David, I know you've got a lot of, well, you've been working on it tonight, but, you probably were, I was not at the planning board meeting.
Okay, so I was, so we had a discussion about the draft master plan reexamination report, which Doug presented, and we had a discussion at planning board. I can't remember the highlights, because I just, all I can really say is water everywhere. Drink, I just, anyway, you ever read it? I think everything I've done this month incorporated into this, so other than meeting with Doug and Dave Meisler tomorrow morning, talking about getting that new well by. So,
And did it, with apologies, I guess the step would be for them to adopt it. Did that happen last night, or the master plan?
No, they didn't. Okay, adopted. I mean, it was really just, I think it was really more of a formal presentation to the planning board and an opportunity for public comment and so on, and sorry, I was a little fried when I was there, so understood this stuff, but, yeah.
So more to come on that.
More to come on that, and yeah, and the one application that was scheduled was postponed in May, so it wasn't. There were no restricted appropriate results, so, so missing something, so, that's all I got.
Good. So, and I don't mean to be cagey about bouncing around here, but like, go in and then out to, how do you want to go next?
Sure. I will try to go quickly. I know it's late. For the EDC, we did review the parking memo I mentioned last month with Doug, and we plan to have an ordinance at next month's meeting. We made a couple changes. We are recommending a 2-hour no parking zone in front of the meeting house, whereas previously it would have been unrestricted, and that was actually based on their concerns, so we stepped that back a bit. And we also changed our Sunday recommendations for having Sunday hours be restricted between the hours of noon and 6 rather than 8 to 8, as we are asking for the remainder of the week. But we can have that, more detailed discussion next month. But I do, if members of the council have comments before we draft the ordinance, that would be great. We have heard from several merchants, just kind of on the street, and one that I've been talking to Doug with, kind of an extreme lack of enforcement on the 2-hour parking. And so just, making progress on that. Because the merchants do rely on those restrictions. Brianna and Lori are going to be launching the Adopt a Garden program to fill and maintain the borough planters. The sponsorships will be $190 per planter, and that will cover native plants in that planter all year long, including a tree over the holiday season, as well as maintenance. So you will see flyers about that soon. I will get one so that we can get one up on the website. Because both businesses and residents are invited to sponsor planters if they would like to do that. And just a reminder, the cruise night is May 10th for the rain date. For the green team, the Green Advocates group have met. I feel like we've gotten a really good start. It's really late, so I won't get into any details now. I will be attending the Sustainable Jersey Summit in May. We will be hosting our first zero waste picnic it's just a community picnic / potluck. It will be inside if it is raining on Earth Day weekend, Sunday, April 21st from 5 to 7 p.m. at the train station. It is potluck style and zero waste, which means everybody brings their own dishes, their own utensils. They bring a dish to share, and at the end, where there's nothing to clean up because everybody brings home their own dirty dishes to their own sink. And it's literally just about sharing a meal with your neighbors. And so we also hope to use that event to do our first collection for the car seat recycling event. We will save people the trip to Target. So we will be collecting car seats that are no longer usable to save them from a landfill, and they will be recycled. Trex Recycling has started upstairs in the lobby of Borough Hall today. And so we will be sharing information on the website soon. But as a reminder, Borough Hall is open Monday to Friday, 8:30 to 4:30. So people can bring in its plastic film recycling. You may have dropped it off at Wegmans previously. it's gotta be clean and dry plastic film, so it can be Ziploc bags, it can be toilet paper, the plastic that comes over your toilet paper. You get a mattress, that giant piece of plastic that comes over your mattress, we'll take it. And if we get 1,000 pounds in a year, then we get a free bench. And we keep all that plastic out of the landfill, so, which is lovely. A rule of thumb, if it's stretchy, yes, if it's crinkly and crunchy, no. Okay, so if you can kind of pull it, get like this, chips, no. And I have signs up in Borough Hall about what's allowed. And we will also I will get Reggie information for the website tomorrow, so that sometime next week he can get up there. And I think that's it.
To add, I was not able to go to the Municipal Alliance, but there is going to be a Narcan training, at the Convention Coalition in Mercer County. Reggie, were you able to print out that flyer?
I don't remember.
Okay, well, Reggie will put it upstairs on the bulletin board if anyone's interested. April 15th at 6 p.m. You'll get 2 doses of Narcan to take home with you. Again, you never know when you might need this training, so I encourage everyone to go do that. And for PB staff, we met on Monday, March 18th. Our new meeting schedule is the 3rd Monday of the month, so meeting April 15th at 7 p.m. Our next meeting, we discussed EDC's parking memo, the upcoming Drive 25 campaign, which is currently postponed TBD. We're just waiting for the new 25-mile-an-hour speed limit signs to go up on East Broad Street before we begin our education campaign, followed by increased enforcement when the entirety of Broad Street will be 25 miles an hour. There's a lot of events coming up in May for National Bike Safety Month, including a walk, bike, and run to school event with HES and the Greater Mercer TMA on May 8th, which is a Wednesday. So that morning, people will be meeting at 3 locations in town, walking and biking to school together. We will have the Hopewell Township Police Department there to help. And we also reviewed our phase 2 report in Hopewell Borough roads, heavy traffic and cut-throughs, the delicious brownies made by our very own Rachel Bourne back here, the Q25 and to celebrate our Drive 25 campaign. And that is all for me.
Thank you. Very quick things for me. I'm like looking at my notes and like my eyes are like glossing over. I can't read what I wrote here. There's every month I'll try to the extent there is some update on any of the litigation matters we're in. I'd like to give an update this month. Best I can tell, really nothing has advanced or moved, whether it's the pilot litigation, Verizon, or anything else that I'm tracking. Communications, I want to thank Heidi and Krista. We meet now. It'll be next Wednesday, but every other week. Stay tuned very soon for our social media to be turned on for a way to follow the borough. And I just want to thank our town attorney, Lisa, for helping us on that.
Thank you, Heidi.
There was a dovetailing to that, the Hopewell Valley EMS group met to talk about their communications tools, and it sounds like we'll soon have some information to share about how to get on the township police department and the county's alert system, and then how we can get our information out on that as well. Without being specific, I want to thank Doug for I'll just say policing our shared services, or thinking about some new opportunities for savings, and talking to our neighboring municipalities. Perhaps more to come in the coming months on that. And something I wrote in circles here that I didn't even know what letters these are, so. It looks like A-bus, A-B-B-S. Whatever that means, with apologies. Technically, we do have one more, we will open the meeting to the public one last time, for those in person and online, so.
I can do it in less than a minute.
All right, name that.
Get it.
I hope that before that the leaks under Broad Street are repaired before Mercer County comes in and repaves it.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Absolutely, yeah.
And I have just a thought, a suggestion for the town hall meeting, street signs that go all over the place, put it on people's front yards, town hall, because there's still people that don't get the emails and do all that.
Well, listen, you're in charge of getting the word out. You tell everyone.
Hello.
We're gonna have social media.
And we're gonna do a mailing as well.
Okay,
Yes,
okay,
yeah.
I just.
It's gonna be land there.
There will be less than a minute.
And if any of the remaining people online would like to join us virtually, please raise your hand now or forever hold your peace.
I am putting my coat on.
Seeing none, I will take a motion to close the last public session.
I'll second that.
Second, all in favor?
Aye.
And I will take a motion to adjourn the meeting.
Second.
Samara and then Heidi second, all in favor?
Aye.
Thank you all.
This is a long one. Wow, real marathon. Can't wait, yeah, to read it.
Yeah.
They are not all this long.